Chapter 298. Ning Shu asked, "Didn't they say where the envoy went after he left the house?" The officer answered, "They said they saw the envoy walking towards the balcony, but they didn't see it clearly." Ning Shu immediately walked to Susu's room and found that Susu's room was in the southwest corner. It made sense that she didn't see it clearly. Hey, this is strange. Why didn't he find another beauty in the middle of the night and go to the balcony to enjoy the cold wind? Is there a beautiful female ghost on the balcony that seduced his soul? The people outside can't come in, and the people inside can testify for each other. Is it true that the female ghost floated in to confuse the envoy, killed him, and then escaped through the wall? Hui Mo's imagination was so rich that he even amused himself. Ning Shu's eyes were as clear and calm as the morning dew. She looked straight ahead and observed how far the envoy would go from the room to the balcony, and where he would pass by on the way. Even in the impregnable palace, fourth Miss Qi could disappear from the fragrant hall. What is there to be surprised about in this world? My master once said, unsolved cases in this world are confusing and unsolvable at first glance, but in fact, they all have their own key points. If the key point is found, then everything will be clear. If they couldn't find it, many people would attribute it to ghosts and demons, casting a dark shadow over these unsolved cases and ending them hastily. In fact, 9 out of 10 cases that are disguised as ghosts can be proved to be man-made. What about the other case? Either he didn't care about his life or he was unlucky. After walking this part of the road, Ning Shu walked around the murder scene and asked Hui Mo to copy the half of the footprints beside the pool of blood on the paper. As for the reason why she didn't write, she admitted that her drawing skills were indeed too outstanding and she was too embarrassed to see it. After doing all this, Ning Shu took the blueprint and started walking from the 3rd floor, floor by floor. She didn't miss a single door or window, and finally reached the 1st floor with great difficulty. Then, she climbed step by step back to the 3rd floor. Just like that, she kept going back and forth from all the small doors in all directions. For a whole hour, she had a clear understanding of the terrain here. Hui Mo was dizzy and his stomach was beating. "Lady Ning, it's almost noon. Shall we eat something before we continue?" Ning Shu thought for a while and agreed. She had asked the officials to bring the procuress and Susu here from the Dali temple. They should be here in 2 hours. It's a good time to fill up her stomach. So she got up and patted the dust off her hands. "Let's go," Hui Mo said excitedly. "Then let's go to Dong Lai Shun. Their roast mutton is really fragrant. When I went to explore the terrain before, the aroma kept circling around me. I was almost drooling. No wonder the princes like to eat it." The two walked out of Xuanfang Terrace one after the other. After a few steps, they saw a beggar-like old woman sitting there not far away. She was mumbling something and the officials couldn't drive her away. Hui Mo looked over and said, "Oh, that old woman. She was there just now. People nearby said that she is a lunatic. She has been crazy for more than 20 years. She talks nonsense all day long. No one cares about her." Ning Shu was about to walk away when she suddenly heard a few words coming out of the old woman's mouth. She walked over and bent down. "Old woman, what are you talking about? I seem to have heard you just say, revenge?" The old woman was shocked. She suddenly grabbed Ning Shu's hand and screamed, "She is back. She must be back. Xue Hongyi is back for revenge." Xue Hongyi. Hearing this name, Ning Shu suddenly had a flash of white light in her mind. She finally found the reason for the inexplicable familiar feeling that lingered in her mind after she saw the envoy's death. Embroidery needle, carving words, cutting off the penis, blinding eyes. When she was a child, she once saw an almost identical murder case in the cold case records collected by her master for many years. The name of the murderer was Xue Hongyi. After telling Hui Mo, he was shocked, the same way of murder. It must be the same person who committed the crime. "Let's catch this person called Xue Hongyi quickly." Ning Shu turned her head and looked at him silently. More than 20 years ago, after the real murderer was exposed, she turned around and jumped into the river to commit suicide. Her body sank in the water for a night before it was fished out from downstream. She really died. Are we going to catch her in the grave? Hui Mo was stunned and then frightened. He had goosebumps all over his body. He jumped back and said, Lady Ning, don't make such a joke. I'm scared. Chapter 299. Every day, all kinds of new things happened in Shi City. Life's joys and sorrows were condensed here. Not to mention, who could suddenly remember something that happened 20 years ago? Until the old woman called out Shuehongi, the old people who stayed here suddenly realized that Shuehongi was that Shuehongi. Since the founding of Great Yu, the capital's Shi City had gone through 100 years before it gradually became the charming and gentle scene of beautiful women everywhere. In these 100 years, there was a new courtesan queen every year. Every 3 to 5 years, the beauties who once dominated the capital would be thrown to the back of people's minds. Shuehongi was definitely not the most gorgeous of them all, but she was the most unique of them all. She was born in a family of generals. Because her father was defeated, her family declined. Her fiancé's family, who had been engaged to her since she was a child, personally submitted a letter of impeachment to the emperor. After her father was executed, her sister-in-law lost her husband. Faced with the help of her fiancé's family, she tore the marriage contract in half on the street and said that she would rather be a brothel girl than marry into the enemy's family. Many people thought that she was just speaking out of anger. Unexpectedly, when she turned around, she really walked into 100 Flowers Tower. With a unique sword dance, she became the new courtesan queen. If a beauty was only beautiful on the outside, after a shallow taste, it would quickly become boring. Her beauty was hidden in her bones, unique and unique. Her natural and unrestrained personality was pursued by countless famous young masters. In order to obtain a glance from her, they did not hesitate to fight, but she was still free and easy. No matter high or low, if she liked, she would not take a single cent. If she was unhappy, she would not take even 10,000 gold. It was as if she was playing with men, and not the other way around. It was said that even the Su Wangye at that time wanted to marry her as a concubine, but she flatly refused. Everyone was guessing which man would subdue this hot and suffocating red rose, or would she subdue all the men in the world? Until one day, without warning, she suddenly took off her card and refused to accept a guest. She redeemed herself and said that she was going to marry. The person she chose was not a noble, nor was he a rich merchant. Instead, he was an ordinary scholar. The betrothal gift was a poem, and the dowry was her. She cut off her past life as soon as she said so. She took off her luxurious clothes, threw away the brocade ornaments, and changed into coarse hemp clothes. Every day, she peacefully embroidered the dragon and phoenix wedding dress and red shoes for herself in the small house. Countless people were filled with regret and regret. There were even people who brought all their belongings to block her door, begging her to give them another chance. She never came out of the house. Gradually, everyone's thoughts faded, and they shifted their attention to the next courtesan. However, they heard a shocking piece of news. On the night before Shuehongi's wedding, she was suddenly humiliated and lost her virginity. Some people said, "What kind of innocence is a brothel girl's innocence?" In any case, her jade-like arms were pillowed on by 1,000 men, and her lips were tasted by 10,000 men. In the face of those people's mockery and ridicule, she wiped away her tears and calmly ran to break off the engagement. Then, she went to 100 Flowers Tower to retrieve the sword that her father had left for her. The next night, the hooligan who raped her was stabbed several times. His eyes were poked blind, his sinful root was cut off, his face was tattooed, and he died at home. When the officials came to the door, she opened her eyes and frankly admitted, "I did it." "So what?" She sneered, turned around and jumped into the Chaobai River. Since then, she had passed away. Until now, there was still an old man who lamented, she was really a unique woman. What a pity. After listening to the story pieced together by the old people around, Hui Mo could not help but sigh, this Miss Shue's life was too rough. She met wolves and beasts. Her good life was ruined by men. That scholar was also too much. He did not protect her well. She obviously wanted to die when she broke off the engagement. Why didn't he stop her? There are no good men. Chapter 300. Ning Shu stared at him silently, her eyes slowly sweeping down from his chest. Hui Mo covered his chest shyly, turned around and said, I'm saying that those men are not good people. I'm a good person. Ah, no, I'm not a good person. No, I'm a good person. My Shizzy is also a good person. Our Nanping Prince's mansion is full of good men. Okay, I know. Your Nanping Prince's mansion's boys are the best. After teasing Hui Mo, Ning Shu began to talk seriously. Xue Hongyi has already committed suicide, so this should be a copycat crime. What do you mean? There are generally two kinds of copycat crimes. First, it's to pay homage. The murderer had a similar experience with a senior killer and developed empathy with him. Or, he simply felt that this kind of killing method was very exciting, so he blindly worshipped him and regarded him as a spiritual role model. He couldn't help but imitate his behavior and killing method. Second, it's to frame. When the murderer committed the crime, in order to cover up the truth of his crime, he deliberately imitated a relatively famous modus operandi to divert the attention of the government and achieve the purpose of deceiving everyone. If that's the case, that Xue Hongyi has been dead for so many years. It's impossible to frame her. It should be the first kind. Ning Shu was calm and composed, who said that it's impossible to frame her. If a living person can't be framed, then there are ghosts. Hui Mo's little heart trembled again. But didn't you say that ghosts can't be trusted? Ghosts can't commit crimes, but it can't prevent people from having ghosts in their hearts. Ning Shu raised her chin and motioned to the crowd that was gathering. Sure enough, not long after, someone in the crowd said seriously, 23 years ago, on the day she committed suicide, I was there. I heard with my own ears that Xue Hongyi said before she jumped into the river, if there are any evil men in the world, even if I have to climb up from the ground, I will kill all of them. She must be the one who killed the envoy. Otherwise, how could they die exactly the same? A few days ago, I was chatting with Boss Qian of the tile house. She saw with her own eyes that the envoy flirted with a little girl who sold flowers and almost jumped into the river to commit suicide. Maybe this stimulated Xue Hongyi, who died in Chaobai River, and summoned her ghost back. Ah. No wonder when I was packing up my stall last night, I vaguely saw a red flash across the Chaobai River. I thought I was old and my eyes were playing tricks on me. I didn't expect it to really be a ghost. Buddha bless, Buddha bless. The speed of gossip was always the fastest, especially when it was mixed with the mysterious and unfathomable theories of ghosts and gods. Not long after, the news of Xue Hongyi's return to kill spread throughout the entire Shi city. The sun at noon was really scorching. Looking at the crowd that was slowly dispersing, Ning Shu whispered in Huemo's ear, you keep an eye on the man who blamed Xue Hongyi for the murder at the beginning, and I'll keep an eye on the weird old lady. I feel that one of them must have a problem. Hui Mo nodded and followed him immediately. Ning Shu stood in the shade of the tree and silently observed the dirty old lady for a long time. When the crowd had all dispersed, she finally stood up shakily and walked forward aimlessly with her back hunched. She continued to murmur. The nearby merchants and pedestrians seemed to know her. They either drove her away in disgust or kindly threw a copper coin or a steamed bun into her broken bowl. The old lady picked up the steamed bun and wolfed it down. Then she continued to walk forward, through one alley after another. Ning Shu followed her for more than an hour and found nothing wrong with her. When she was thinking about whether to go back or not, she suddenly found that she had inadvertently followed her into a deserted alley. Her heart skipped a beat and she stopped, but it was too late. The old lady suddenly turned her head and gave Ning Shu a gloomy smile. She suddenly threw the broken bowl in her hand at Ning Shu. Go to hell. Chapter 301. It happened so suddenly that Ning Shu only had time to kick the bowl and shatter it. In the next moment, a handful of silver needles dipped in poison flew towards her face. Ning Shu didn't have any strength to defend herself. Seeing those poisonous needles were about to pierce her skin and take her life, an umbrella swept over and blocked those poisonous needles. Then, the person who came swept a leg over and hit the old woman's heart. After that, the old woman flipped over and landed lightly. It was Zi Gui. Looking at the old woman who was seriously injured and stunned, Ning Shu raised her eyebrows and smiled. I already guessed that someone would make a move on me while investigating this case. I didn't expect that you guys couldn't hold back after half a day. You guys haven't mastered the art of tolerance yet. Zigui, they took the initiative to come to us. How can we not accept it? Leave one alive to bring her back. Zigui took out a soft whip from his waist and replied, yes. The old woman wiped the blood from her mouth and said in a hoarse voice. It was actually a man. You want to catch me? Let's see if you have the life to do so. A huge crossbow appeared on the top of the tree behind him. There was a short knife on the bowstring. With a bang, it flew towards Ningxu. Miss, be careful. Zigui immediately jumped in front of Ningxu. In an instant, blood bloomed on his shoulder. The strong poison quickly spread from the wound to his entire body. Zigui. Ningxu's pupils contracted. She supported Zigui and her face turned pale. The old woman sneered, now there's no one to block for you. I originally listened to my master and wanted to keep you alive until you're 17 years old. I can't disobey my master's orders. Today, I can only break your 2 legs to play with. The crossbow in the distance was pulled taut again. With a soft sound, 2 knives shot out. Ningxu instinctively arched her body and protected the seriously injured Zigui in her arms. She closed her eyes tightly. She thought she was smart and used herself as bait. She didn't expect that she had a good plan. Others might not have a ladder to cross the wall. At that moment, there was a buzzing sound in her head. She didn't have any other thoughts. There were only 3 lonely words, Xiahou Qing. She heard the sound of the 2 knives piercing through the air and flying towards her. His heart was almost paralyzed. In the next moment, 2 iron arrows flew from opposite directions. Ding, ding. 2 sounds sent the dagger flying. Then, the 3rd iron arrow pierced through the air and pierced the arm of the crossbowman hiding in the shade. The man disappeared with a whoosh, leaving a trail of blood on the green leaves. The old lady saw that something was wrong and quickly turned around. She was kicked by the young man who was chasing after her and fell flat on her face. Ningxu opened her eyes, still in shock. She saw a tanned young man with a bow in one hand and a quiver on his back. He was holding a bow in one hand and stepping on the back of the old lady with the other. He said cheerfully, "You guys are also archers. I am also an archer. Why don't you compete with me to see which pot is better? You want me to break your legs and play with them?" At the entrance of the alley, Ju Sai supported Xiahou Qing and slowly appeared. When she saw the familiar figure, Ningxu was like a house cat that was bullied outside and finally found its master. Her heart was finally relieved. Her nose was still a little sour, and she looked at him with a pair of clear eyes. But the master had a cold face and didn't seem to welcome her at all. Ju Sai said, "Shi Yang, speak properly." Okay. I just miss my hometown language because I haven't spoken it for a long time." The young man called Shi Yang turned his head and said, "Speak. Which hole are you hiding in? And who is your master?" "My master is Tianyu Yu, a phoenix among men. You guys are not qualified to hear his name." The old lady turned her head and smiled at Ningxu. She whispered in a sandpaper-like voice, "Lady Ning, don't worry. There are still 4 months. I will wait for you in the netherworld." Shi Yang quickly pinched his chin. Poisonous blood flowed out of the man's mouth. He was already dead. But the curse he uttered before he died lingered in Ningxu's heart like a haze and couldn't be dispelled for a long time. "Fuck you." Shi Yang searched for a long time but didn't find anything useful. He threw the dirty and smelly body down and returned to Xiahou Qing's side. Seeing the master and servants turn to leave without paying attention to her, Ningxu hurriedly said, "Your Highness." "What is it?" Xiahou Qing turned his head slightly and responded coldly. Ningxu supported Zigui and let him lean on her shoulder. Facing Xiahou Qing, who was so cold and distant from her, she didn't know why, but she felt a sense of unease that she hadn't felt in a long time. "My secret guard Zigui is seriously injured. The wound is poisonous. Your Highness, please save him." Xiahou Qing snorted disdainfully. He turned his head and walked a long way before he proudly said, "Take him away." Chapter 302. Ningxu's heart was finally at ease. She supported Zigui and struggled to walk to the carriage that was 100 steps away. Ju Sai glanced at Xiahou Qing's expression and turned back. "Shi Yang, you carry him. If the wound is pulled back and forth like this, The poison will spread faster. Shi Yang immediately jumped away. I don't want to. Beautiful women are all tigers. Stay away from me. Ju Sai silently flew a dagger at him. Shi Yang's shoulder touched and reluctantly moved over to carry the precious quiver in front of him. He bent down to carry Zi Gui on his back. As he walked, he sadly muttered, I touched a woman. I'm not clean anymore. I'm not clean anymore. In a half-conscious state, Zi Gui frowned and said with annoyance, You, put me down. I'll walk by myself. Noisy. You dare to complain that I'm noisy? I didn't complain that you tainted my innocence. You ask me to put you down? I won't. I want to carry you. I want to carry you. Ningshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiahou Qing was such an otherworldly person. Why did he raise so many weirdos around him? Huemore was naive and naughty, Tianwen was gossipy, and Shi Yang was like Sun Wukong. Only Ju Sai was normal. He was a copy of Xiahou Qing and could shock the other three. But this otherworldly person sat in the carriage with his jade-like face looking out of the window. Except for the few words just now, he didn't give her a single word, as if she didn't exist at all. Holding Zi Gui on her knees, Ningshu looked at him. Her heart was in turmoil for a long time before she carefully said, Thank you, Your Highness, for saving my daughter's life at the critical moment. As still as water. I saw those short knives. They were exactly the same as the ones that killed Wen Hui Niang. The handles of the knives have the same threads. They were also shot with crossbows. This shows that the case of the envoy's sudden death was also manipulated by them. But I'm very curious. From Consort Nguyen to Consort Qi to the envoy, plus you and me, their targets are disorderly and seemingly unrelated. What is their purpose? Ningshu deliberately said a witty sentence. Could it be that they want to learn from Deji and bring disaster to the country? The 8 winds did not move. Your Highness, are you angry with my daughter? He was still speechless. Ningshu closed her mouth. Her heart felt empty, so she copied him and looked out the window. She watched the camphor trees cast their shade one after another, and the walls of the houses in the alley were covered with green usneas. She felt the rare quiet coolness in the alley. After a long time, she lowered her head and let out a soft laugh. Hearing her laughter, Xiahou Qing finally showed a trace of emotion. He mocked, What are you laughing at? You're finally able to get married before you're 17. Are you happy? No, Ningshu silently shook her head, I'm laughing. It seems that every time I'm in danger and call out Your Highness' name in my heart, Your Highness will always appear and save my life. It was the same when the Empress wanted to kill me in the Phoenix Algae Palace. It was the same when the venomous bees were wreaking havoc in the Xianqing Monastery. It was the same today. So I feel that it's interesting. Your Highness really is my savior. She didn't know if it was because he was flattered by her savior, or because the word no smoothed his hair, but the ice on Xiahou Qing's face melted a little. But his tone was still distant, it was just a coincidence. Don't flatter yourself. It was such a remote alley. It wasn't on the way, and there were no restaurants or markets. How could it be so coincidental? Of course, Ningshu didn't have the guts to ask. She only dared to snicker. Her eyes curved, and there were thousands of fragments of stars in her eyes. Chapter 303. She thought for a bit and then said, Your Highness heard it at the Supreme Court this morning, right? So when I chased after the carriage, Your Highness didn't stop. Is it because you're angry? Hearing her mention the morning, Xiahou Qing frowned and continued to be cold. That's your own business. Who you're going to marry and who you're going to marry has nothing to do with me. Why would I be angry? Ningshu took a deep breath and gathered her courage to seriously look at him. Her clear eyes reflected Xiahou Qing's shadow and nothing else. If I said that this marriage was not what I wanted, would Your Highness believe me? After experiencing the betrayal of her first life, 300 years, 7 lives, and 7 deaths, it had become a habit for her to face death alone. Every time death came, she would chew up the pain, fear, and despair bit by bit and swallow it into her stomach. She would never talk to anyone about it. Other than herself, she didn't expect anyone, didn't rely on anyone, and didn't believe in anyone. Later, even when she faced the pain of being cut to pieces and begging for death, She was only left with numbness. In any case, no one would come to save her. She was destined to die miserably. But in this life, her fate was restarted. Her lost family was found and her flesh and blood returned to her side. Then, she met him. She seemed to have been born with a weak personality. When she was sick, there was someone to act spoiled. When she made a mistake, she would be forgiven. When she was in danger, she suddenly had a trace of luck. Thinking what if, he was willing to save her. Then, he really did appear, again and again. It gave her a chance to live and ignited a long-lost hope. There was indeed a deal between them, a cooperation, that's right. But gradually, outside of the deal, the place on the left side of her chest that was constantly beating could clearly feel that something was different. In the past, she didn't care who she married or what kind of face she would spend the rest of her life with. In any case, she just needed to guard her heart and not move it. Now, she cared. She didn't want him to die, she didn't want him to misunderstand, she didn't want him to be disappointed. She didn't want any of these things, so this morning, she subconsciously chased after him so far, wanting to explain it clearly to him. Long before she had thought it through, her instincts had already made the decision for her. It would be foolish to continue deceiving oneself and others. Ning Shu was not the sloppy type. Feeling the seriousness in Ning Shu's voice, Xiahou Qing finally turned his head. His face, which was as beautiful as the first snow, revealed a touch of gentleness, which spread like ink. Then what's your plan? Ning Shu's face unconsciously burned. She hurriedly said, in short, I will find a way to cancel this marriage as soon as possible. After that, I will work even harder to catch the mastermind behind the scenes with your highness. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he slowly said, all right. Ning Shu also laughed, her face burning even more. He had only said one word. Why was she so nervous? Where was her pride? In order to prevent him from discovering such a shameful thing, she quickly pressed her palms to her face to cool it down. But when she held her face, her heart beat even faster. Before catching that person, neither of them could promise the other. He couldn't promise that he wouldn't die from the poison at any time, and she couldn't promise that the tragedy wouldn't happen again. Her family would be safe and she would be safe and sound. This seemed to be a difficult knot to untie. The only way was to catch the rat hiding in the gutter. It had to be. Chapter 304. I knew it. I knew it. How could anyone escape from my eyes? It turned out that the real person's skin was peeled off and then dressed up. No wonder even I couldn't see through it. Oh, so disgusting. Hui Mo squatted on the ground and peeled off the skin of the old lady. He was so disgusted that he stuck out his tongue. That piece of human skin was thrown to the ground by Hui Mo. Ning Shu moved aside in disgust and asked, who is the old woman who was killed? Tian Wen was a qualified gossiper. He immediately said, I just asked around. Her name is Bai Zhu. She used to be Xue Hongyi's maid more than 20 years ago. After Xue Hongyi committed suicide, she also became crazy. She has been begging around the West Market for a living. Everyone said that she was scared to death by Xue Hongyi's murderous look. Ning Shu snorted. She took out a person who had been dead for more than 20 years to cover up her murder. That's a painstaking effort. However, the person was already dead. Even if they wanted to ask, they couldn't find anything. Not long after, the two corpses, one real and one fake, were dragged away by the people from the Dali Temple. Tian Wen was responsible for collecting information. It was inconvenient for him to show up for too long, so he said goodbye and disappeared. Now, except for the half footprint and the embroidery needle, there was no evidence at all. As for the footprint, Ning Shu gave it to the officials of the Dali Temple to compare one by one. None of the people who stayed on the third floor last night matched. After the procuress brought Susu here, she talked for a long time. She swore that it was absolutely not them who did it, and it was absolutely not the people in their building who did it. Her expression was so sincere that she almost pointed to the sky and cried out for injustice. My lord, you're just and honorable. We are so innocent. People like us who roll around in the pleasure field are the most lowly people in the world. We do the most despised business and earn the most bitter money. We deal with all kinds of customers every day. Who would want to smash their own bowl of rice? Let's take Susu as an example. Her crippled father and sick mother depend on her to survive every day. If the envoy is killed, her whole family will die. There are many families in the brothel that are worse off than her family. We really didn't kill the envoy. The brothel keeper's tears and snot flowed down her face. Ning-Shu said, I heard that the envoy especially likes to hang around Xuanfeng stage. Every 3 to 5 days, he would visit once. Moreover, he has a bad temper and has humiliated many girls during this period. Is this true? The brothel keeper smiled bitterly and said, Miss is taking us too seriously. We are in the flesh business. When the customers see us happy, they treat us like pets and play with us. When they are unhappy, beating, scolding, and whipping are all light punishments. How can we not wake up by ourselves? What kind of humiliation had he not suffered? How could he kill someone just because of this? How many prostitutes could learn from Xue Hongyi, who would rather die than live in Dishina? She was one of a kind. As for the enmity, it is even more impossible. The envoy has only been in the capital for a short period of time. The girls didn't even recognize him before. Miss Susu's eyes were swollen from crying. She nodded repeatedly, Miss, although I was slapped by the envoy, I definitely wouldn't kill him over such a small matter. I definitely don't have the guts to do so. Ning-Shu's thoughts were a bit messed up by the crying. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she coaxed this delicate beauty. She felt extremely tired. After Susu stopped crying, Ning-Shu's expression changed. From what mother said just now, you know Xue Hongyi? Hearing Ning-Shu's question, the brothel keeper was silent. She tidied up the messy hair on her temples and sighed. I know her, how could I not know her? After more than 20 years, I almost forgot about her. If it wasn't for the envoy's death, I really wouldn't have remembered her. At that time, she and I were both working in 100 Flowers Tower. In terms of qualifications, I was her senior. Before she came, I was the top hostess in 100 Flowers Tower. When she came, she stole my limelight. That arrogance of hers was really annoying at first. Who knew that such a person would end up like that? Chapter 305. Ning-Shu pretended to be curious. I heard that before Xue Hongyi committed suicide, she used her life to curse. If there is another evil man in the world, even if I have to crawl up from the ground, I will kill all of them. Is there such a thing? The procuress snorted. Who said that? On the day of her death, there were only a few people around. I heard that the officers were going to catch her, so I quickly went to find her. Miss, please understand that she committed a murder. I had no intention of persuading her to run away. It's just that, it's not worth it to lose her life for that scum. But when I arrived, it was already too late. She was already standing at the side of Chaobai River, surrounded by officials. Her eyes kept looking around. I knew that she was waiting for the scholar that she pledged her life to, but he didn't come in the end. Xue Hongyi smiled and jumped into the river. I was the one who identified the corpse. She was beautiful when she was alive, but ugly when she died. After soaking in the water for a night, her whole body swelled up. Really? The corpse was collected for her by us sisters. That stinky scholar was like a dead person from the beginning to the end. He didn't even show his face once. In my opinion, Xue Hongyi was always carefree and unrestrained, but she was blind when it came to men. Ning-Shu nodded with a sigh. Most of the time, this saying was true. Most of the time, people who were righteous tended to be dog butchers while those who were heartless tended to be scholars. However, Xue Hongyi died early, so it was useless to dwell on this matter. Thus, Ning-Shu said, there is one more thing that I want to ask mother. I checked the layout of the Searchfang Terrace this morning. The east, west, and west sides of the first floor have one main door, 2 side doors, and 12 windows. Every door is guarded by people, is that right? That's right. It's to prevent customers from running away after enjoying themselves. After all, there are too many people here. Besides these, is there any other entrance or exit? Or any other way to enter the building? The procuress lowered her head and her eyes flashed. She seemed to be thinking carefully. No, there shouldn't be. I heard from the Wash Opera that there are some experts who can jump 3 feet high and have the ability to leap over roofs and vault over walls. Could it be that the murderer used this method to sneak in? Otherwise, I have dozens of hired thugs here. How could none of them be watched? That must be it. That's right, that's right. I've also heard of people who know how to hit acupoints. They hit the acupoints and when they wake up, they won't be able to remember anything. Miss, hurry up and check it out. The more she talked, the more mysterious she became. Ning Shu was really good at explaining to her that the things in the play were exaggerated and not real. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she waved her hand and asked the people of the Supreme Court to take them back. Before leaving, Ning Shu asked Su Su, I heard that Miss Su Su hasn't been feeling well recently. You even asked someone to buy a jade hairpin flower. Is that true? Su Su's face turned red. She clenched her fingers and said with difficulty, Yes. Yes. In my line of work, I often suffer from some minor illnesses related to that. For the past 2 months, I haven't had a period, and I also need to relieve myself. I heard from the sisters in the building that if you take a mixture of jade hairpin flower, snakeskin, and lilac, and wash it, it will be effective. So I asked Miss who sells flowers in Shui City, to buy some. Then do you remember what day of the month Miss came? Su Su's eyelashes trembled, the 7th day of the 5th month. The envoy came to see me that day. I really couldn't wait on him, so he left unhappily. That's why I remember. After that, did the envoy ever mention to you what happened that night? Su Su shook her head. No, the envoy always comes here to have fun. He never chats with us. A woman was worth 500 ducks, and the ones in the brothel were worth 1,000. Ning Shu rubbed her temples and continued to walk slowly in the building. She was deep in thought. Xiahou Qing had already found out the details of the young masters who stayed on the 3rd floor last night. So far, he hadn't found any motive to kill them. Although the envoy had a bad temper, he was generous. Young Master Tan often paid for him, so the girls in the building didn't have a strong motive. Thinking of this name in her heart, Ning Shu couldn't help but sigh. She really didn't want to involve the girl who was humiliated and suffered so much for no reason in this case. However, now many clues were pointing to her. Moreover, she had a similar experience with Xue Hongyi, so she did have a motive to imitate the crime. It seemed that she had no choice but to find her. Chapter 306. Ning Shu and Huemore immediately got on the horse under the warm sun and rode in the direction of Ye's house. When they reached the entrance of the alley, their backs were soaked with sweat. They didn't expect to find nothing. The woman who was washing at the door said, "You are late. If you came earlier yesterday, you might have seen them." Yesterday at noon, the family of 3 had packed up and went back to their hometown. Ning Shu and Huemore looked at each other and asked, "Went back to their hometown? Why did they suddenly leave the capital?" The woman said with relish, "She can't stay here any longer. Ever since Ye's accident, everyone in the neighborhood knows about it. Don't mention how unpleasant the words are behind Ye's back. Ye's mother wants to protect her daughter, so she can only take her back to her hometown. In my opinion, even if they go back, they can't pretend that it didn't happen. A girl's innocence is the most important thing. When she gets married in the future, will her husband not notice it? Ye's life is ruined." After the woman finished chatting, she looked at them with vigilance. "Who are you two? Why do you want to know about her family?" Ning Shu clapped her hands and sighed. "Sigh, we're from Sanliqiao jewelry shop. Her family had ordered a few pieces of jewelry from our shop, saying that they were preparing for their wedding. Originally, we agreed to pay the deposit first, and they would pay the rest when the jewelry was ready. But several days have passed since the agreed day to pick up the jewelry, and we haven't seen them. The boss was very anxious, so he asked us to hurry them. You see, this jewelry was originally ordered for each person. It took a lot of effort to finish it. But her family suddenly doesn't want it. Who do you want us to sell it to? Don't you think it makes sense?" The woman nodded. "That's right. But Ye's father and mother are honest people. They didn't do it on purpose. I'm afraid that they were confused by the recent events, so they forgot about it. But even if they remember, the marriage has been cancelled, so there is no place to use the jewelry. Ning Shu said vividly, whether they want it or not, they have to give us a definite answer. We rely on our reputation to do business. If they don't want it, we can just melt the jewelry and make a new style for them. Does elder sister know where their hometown is? My shop has a few branches. Maybe I can find her place. This. The woman rolled her eyes, obviously hiding something. Ning Shu understood and took out a few copper coins from her bosom. Good sister, then tell me. I just started working in the shop a few days ago. This is the first task the boss gave me. If I don't do it well, the boss will definitely scold me to death. The woman hurriedly put the 5 copper coins into her pocket and said with a smile, "Oh my, sister can't see people suffering. Let me think. I heard about it when I was chatting with Iya's mother. Her hometown is in Chong County. It's less than 30 miles away from the capital." Ning Shu said sweetly, "Thank you, elder sister." Ning Shu walked out of the alley and took the tide horse away. She touched her forehead and found that it was full of sweat. Hui Mo said dejectedly, "It's such a hot day. I came here for nothing. It's so hot." He used his hand as a fan and fanned himself a few times, but he didn't feel cold. He saw that there was a shop selling lotus leaves on the side of the road, so he quickly ran to buy 2. He gave one to Ning Shu and put the other on his head. Then he felt better. He said, "But, does this mean that we are wrong? Her family left the capital at noon yesterday. The envoy died at night. They didn't have time to commit the crime. Maybe this is just a coincidence. It has nothing to do with her family." Chapter 307. Ning Shu fanned herself with a green lotus leaf and exhaled a mouthful of hot air. "It's just a suspicion. No one can convict her directly before we find the key evidence. But don't you think that they left the capital at the right time? I remember that the last time I met them here was 3 days ago. At that time, Iya couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to commit suicide by jumping into the river. Why didn't she leave that day or the next day? Why didn't she leave until yesterday at noon? After a few hours, the envoy was killed. If the evidence is too good, people will have no choice but to have more doubts." Hui Mo nodded and said, "Yeah. I just walked around her house. She doesn't look rich. She doesn't need to spend 2 days to pack up and go back to her hometown. So, there must be something wrong with her family. Let's go and find her. Don't worry. I will ask for Scythia to bring people to find her family. As for us, let's go back to Xuanfeng Station first." Hui Mo's face fell. "Ah. Why are we going there again? We have almost dug 3 feet into the ground. Don't you think it's enough? No matter who killed the envoy, according to the analysis of the crime scene, the envoy was stabbed 8 times, and each stab caused a large amount of blood to splash out. It must have sprayed onto the murderer. The murderer could have thrown the blood-stained clothes and shoes into the river to destroy the evidence, but the blood on his hands and face would have taken time to clean up. Last night, there were not many people on the 3rd floor, but there were not many. In order to avoid being seen, he had to find a place to hide. I have searched all the rooms on the 3rd floor, but I couldn't find this place. So, we have to search again." Ning Shu stepped on the stirrups and jumped up. She raised her eyebrows. "Are you going or not?" Hui Mo remembered Shiz's order. He said that if anything happened to Lady Ning, he would be responsible for it. He had to say with annoyance, "I'll go. I'll go." What could he do? He was just a weak and helpless little boy. He had no human rights. Ning Shu searched the entire 3rd floor once again. She even knelt on the ground and knocked on every piece of the floor. She did not even let go of the screen and the wardrobe. Not to mention a drop of blood, there was not even a trace of the smell of blood. Hui Mo crawls out from under the bed. His face is covered with soot. He heaves a long sigh. Ning Shu looked at his pitiful appearance and laughed. "Don't sigh. Go and eat something first. Don't you want to eat roast mutton? Let's go." Hui Mo immediately stood up and said energetically, "Let's go." The sky was already completely dark. Gradually, Several lanterns were lit up in the West Market. The specks of light reflected into the river, making both sides of the Chaobai River look like a dream. Unfortunately, due to the influence of the envoy's murder case, Shi City was no longer as lively as it used to be. Among them, Donglai Shun, which was opposite Xuanfang Stage, was the first to bear the brunt. Usually, at this time of the meal, there should be a lot of guests. It was not an exaggeration to say that Donglai Shun was deserted today. No matter how hard he tried to attract guests, it was useless. The boss was so irritable that his face turned black. He pushed the waiter aside and scolded him. "You're really not good at running errands. You're the best at being lazy and pretending to be dead. After so long, you still haven't attracted a single guest. Why did I hire you in the first place? You're just a useless snack. Go away." Only when he saw Ning Shuhui coming over did the boss let him go. He hurriedly put on a smile and went up to greet them. "Two distinguished guests, please come in. Order whatever you want to eat. We have everything here, especially the roasted mutton. Do you want to order 2 plates? Chapter 308. Smelling the fragrant aroma from the kitchen, Hui Mo's eyes lit up. He rubbed his hands and said, "Then give me 2 plates first. As for the other dishes, you can just pick the most popular ones and serve me a few plates." "Okay." Seeing that he was a generous person, the boss's eyes narrowed with a smile. Seeing that the waiter who scolded him was still standing there with his head down, he slapped him and scolded in a low voice, "Hurry up and serve the guests tea. Are you blind?" The waiter suddenly came to his senses and hurried to serve the tea. Ning Shu glanced at the boss. He was raised by his parents. It's better not to insult him like this. "It's really this boy." The boss paused for a moment and continued to flatter, Okay. Whatever you say is good. Ju Yang, after the tea is served, please fan the guests. Look at the hot weather. If I'm not wrong, you are the female detective Lady Ning who went to Xuanfang TV to investigate the case, right? This lowly one has already seen your celestial beauty this morning. The merchant's mouth was indeed good at coaxing people to death. Ning Shu's mouth twitched when she heard that. She waved her hand and said, "It's me, that's right. As for the celestial beauty, there's no need for that." "Oh right, boss, how long have you been running this restaurant?" "It's been many years. My father set up a small stall here. Later, it gradually expanded. Now, it's a long-established restaurant in Shi City. The son of the assistant minister and the son of the prime minister are all my regular customers. My business is very good. Who knew that there would be a murder case? You see, I'm so worried that my mouth is burning. I'm sure that I'll lose a lot of money in the next few months. I heard that the envoy sent someone to buy roast mutton here last night. Yes, he said that the 7th prince wanted to eat it. I was so excited when I heard that. If the prince in the palace also said that it was good, then my restaurant's reputation would be improved. So, I immediately asked someone to send the roast mutton upstairs. Ah, did the detective suspect that the envoy had a problem after eating our mutton? That's a huge injustice. Seeing that the boss was about to swear on his conscience, Ning Shu hurriedly stopped him. Don't worry, we didn't find any problems with the roast mutton. We just want to ask, did the boss see any strange people around or did anything strange happen between last night and the incident today? Strange people or strange things? Detective, I'll call all the waiters over and ask them for you. The boss waved his hand, and the waiters all gathered. The waiters thought carefully, and one of them quickly said, I saw one. Yesterday evening, the envoys held a banquet at Xuanfang Terrace. There was a long queue of carriages and ceremonial carriages, attracting many onlookers. Coincidentally, I was soliciting customers at the entrance when I noticed a thin and small young master staring at them from the corner. At first, I thought he was also here to watch the fun. After watching, he should at least have a meal, right? So, I walked over and wanted to pull him in. Who knew that when I approached him, he pushed me away and ran away as if he was frightened. I came back and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, but I didn't feel that I looked scary. The waiter was glib with his words, and he joked with the others. Don't you think so? The others laughed and slapped him. The waiter who was holding a fan slipped his hand, and the fan fell. He quickly picked it up and apologized to Ning Shu and Hui Mo. Then, he was driven away by the boss in disgust and was replaced by another waiter. This little episode was not worth paying attention to. Hui Mo asked, "Do you remember what that person looked like?" He was wearing a curtain hat, so I couldn't see clearly. I only remember that he wasn't tall, almost as tall as me. The waiter pointed at his ears. The skin on his hands was quite white, just like a girl's. There was also a fragrance on his body. It was already evening, and the sky was dark. Not many people still wear curtain hats, and they weren't afraid of tripping. I thought it was strange at that time, so I paid attention to him. So tall, fragrance on his body, and fear of men. Ning Shu thought for a while. These three characteristics were basically consistent with Er. It seemed that she didn't go back to her hometown at noon yesterday. Chapter 309. Other than this matter, the other waiters couldn't say anything else, so they were dismissed. 2 plates of roasted mutton were served. Hui Mo's eyes lit up as he ate the meat. There was nothing else to ask, so Ning Shu casually said, "I heard that there are a lot of guests in Shi City. There should be a lot of interesting things happening every day. Boss, can you tell us something to relieve our boredom? What interesting things can happen in front of the brothel? It's nothing more than seeking pleasure, fighting for affection, and those kinds of things. If you really want to talk about it, this little one will think about it. Yes, there was something that happened 2 days ago. Do you know Senior Feng from the Dali Temple? Boss, are you talking about Senior Feng, who is about to retire?" The boss leaned over and whispered, "That's him. Hehe, that senior is also a frequent visitor to Shi City. Every 7 or 8 days, he will come here to find Miss Han Meng and Miss Yin Shui." Hui Mo almost spat out the meat in his mouth. Isn't he almost 70 years old? He is complaining about headaches and lung pains all day long. Can he still come to the brothel? He is really old but vigorous. But I heard that he is very henpecked. When he sees Madam, he is like a mouse seeing a cat. Isn't he afraid of being caught and whipped? Ning Shu was speechless. In the ranking list of female tigers in the capital, Imperial Censor Yun's family was number 1, and Senior Feng's family was number 2. At such an old age, his hair was already white, but he still came to the brothel every day to compete with Madam. It was really hard for him. So, when he comes, we will have a good show to watch. Bai Hua Lu, Chun Shui Lu. Madam Feng almost turned over all of these places. So we often make bets in private. We bet when Senior Feng will be caught by Madam Feng, how many slaps will he receive, and how many hours will he kneel on the washboard. Just the afternoon before yesterday, Senior Feng secretly came again. Sure enough, within half an hour, his shrewish madam heard the news and took a kitchen knife with her servants to chase after him. Usually, when Madam Feng went out, she could catch Senior Feng in less than half an hour. That afternoon, Madam Feng almost overturned the entire brothel, but she couldn't find Senior Feng. When she went home with a dark face, Senior Feng was already waiting for her. I heard that Madam Feng almost went crazy that day. It's so funny. The boss was overjoyed, but Ning Shu's expression changed. "Boss, what did you say just now? Seeking Fang platform? Yeah, what's wrong? Please repeat the last few sentences." The boss was confused and repeated the last few sentences. "I say." Madam Feng almost overturned the entire Fang search platform, but she still couldn't find Lord Feng. When she returned home with a dark face, Lord Feng was already waiting for her at home. What happened? Before the boss finished his words, Ning Shu suddenly stood up and pulled Huemore. "Catch the brothel keeper immediately. We were fooled by her. There's a secret passage in the Fang-seeking platform. Sirs, please forgive this old servant. This old servant really didn't mean to deceive you. This is the capital of this old servant's life. If it is revealed, many distinguished guests will no longer come to my place." The procuress cried with tears and snot flowing down her face. The red and white powder on her face was all mixed together, making her look extremely ugly. Tan Siwei heard that there might be important clues, so he personally escorted the procuress here. At this time, his round face darkened, and there was a bit of the seriousness of an official. He reprimanded, "Do you know that you didn't report what you knew and delayed the investigation? How should you be punished?" Chapter 310. The procuress was still pestering them endlessly. "I'm stupid and ignorant. I don't know the law. Please forgive me this time." Ning Shu didn't have time to argue with her. She said, "If we punish her now, it will only waste time." Tan Shaoqing, "Let's talk about it later." Tan Siwei nodded and said, "Where is the secret passage? Take us there now." The procuress wiped her tears bitterly, got up and walked to a huge lotus pot at the corner of the corridor. "It's here." With a bitter face, the brothel keeper rolled up her sleeves and bent down to reach into the basin. After groping around in the water for a while, she heard a muffled sound coming from the wall opposite the lotus basin. The mural slid to the side, revealing a door. Hui Mo went forward and pushed the door open. A secret passage appeared in front of them. It was dark inside, like a beast suddenly opened its mouth. He stared at it with wide eyes. "What the hell? I purposely walked around the lotus pot a few times just now, but I couldn't move it even after moving for a while. I didn't expect it to be played like this. Madam, you really are a genius. Talented." The procuress's smile was uglier than her crying face. "I'm doing this for business. I spent a lot of money to fix this secret passage half a year ago. I won't let ordinary guests use it. Only some distinguished guests who can't enter the building from the front door, or those who are caught red-handed by their wives, I will tell them where the secret passage is." Ning Shu frowned. "How many people know about this secret passage?" "Not many, really not many. At most 10 people. But I swear that there is only one key to the secret passage, and I always keep it with me." The procuress took the key from her waist. "You see, it's still in my hands. It's impossible for anyone to sneak in from the secret passage. That's why I didn't tell you." Hui Mo put his hands on his waist and sneered, "So you're in the right now?" The procuress hurriedly shrank back. She felt that she was bullied by Hui Mo. Ning Shu glanced at her indifferently. "Didn't you take it out and use it the afternoon before yesterday when Lord Feng came to visit? As long as it is taken out, there is a possibility of it being replicated." As soon as she finished speaking, the brothel keeper's knees went soft and she fell forward, almost falling flat on her face. Ning Shu quickly helped her up. The procuress was still in shock and was about to thank her when she suddenly opened her palm. She didn't know when she had pinched a piece of soft clay in her hand, but the outline of the key was already clearly printed on it. She just needed to find a locksmith to cast it according to the mold. This. The procuress was stunned. As long as someone knows the location of this secret passage, there will be a way to get another key. It's true that you carry it with you, but you still have to bathe and sleep. There will always be times when you are tired and careless. Just like just now, if I can copy this key, there will be others who can do the same. I'll ask you one more time. How many times has this secret passage been used since it was opened? Who was it? What time? Who was it? Tell me everything." Ning Shu's eyes were unprecedentedly sharp, staring straight at her like a nail. The procuress hesitated for a while, but she couldn't hold it anymore. She had to take the pen and paper handed by Hui Mo and began to explain. Ning Shu rolled up her sleeves, tied her hair, and said to Hui Mo, "You stay here and watch her write. I'll go down and have a look. Give me a light." Tan Siwei, who was next to her, hurriedly said, "It's so dark down there. Let me do it." Ning Shu was a little afraid of him, so she smiled perfunctorily. "No, I'm not afraid of the dark. And I can only feel at ease after I see the details myself. Then I'll go down with you. If you slip down there alone, I'm really worried." Tan Siwei looked at her sincerely and his face was slightly red. He seemed to be afraid that Ning Shu would refuse again, so he hurriedly said, "And as an official of the imperial court, it's my duty to assist in the investigation." Ning Shu couldn't refuse him anymore. She could only smile sweetly and bitterly. "Well, it's a little dark and steep inside. Shaoqing, be careful." Ning Shu didn't look down on him. Tan Siwei's thin arms looked like bones. He looked like a weak scholar. Maybe he wasn't as agile as her. Ning Shu said casually, But Tan Siwei misunderstood that she was concerned about him. A pair of round rabbit eyes lit up. He took the lantern from the runner beside him and said excitedly, "Okay, I'll be careful." Ning Shu quickly shut her mouth and stepped into the secret passage with the lantern. She was secretly distressed. What the hell is this? Chapter 311. It was a steep and winding wooden staircase. It was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. Only the dim yellow lights in the hands of Ning Shu and the others could illuminate a small part of the path ahead. They didn't want to make a mistake and fall down the tall wooden staircase. Walking in the dark secret passage, Ning Shu glanced back at Tan Siwei, who was holding his sword tightly and carefully walking down step by step. She asked tentatively, "Xiaoqing, do you feel that I'm a little different from when I was in prison?" Tan Siwei was looking around vigilantly, as if he was afraid that a bandit or killer would fly out from a corner. When he heard the question, he retracted his gaze and looked seriously at Ning Shu, who was walking in front of him, through the warm orange light in his hand. In order to make it easier for the investigation, she had changed into men's clothes. Her black hair was neatly tied up, making her look fresh and capable. She was completely different from the soft and delicate Lady Ning in prison, who complained all day long about how boring the prison food was and begged him to bring her books and snacks. Tan Siwei hesitated and said, "It does seem a little different. You were more talkative in prison than you are now. You weren't so serious. You had a lot to say to me and often made some interesting jokes with me. But this is also very normal. After all, we're working on a case now. Naturally, we have to be more focused and serious than usual, especially for such a big case. How can we not treat it seriously? And when you refuted the procuress just now, you were really good. You hit the nail on the head. I have to learn more about investigating cases from you in the future." Ning Shu really wanted to say, "Normal my ass. I've never spoken much to you." The talkative person in prison was not me at all. However, no matter how much she wanted to confess, she had to hold back. If others found out about the switch, Xiahou Qing would also be implicated. How could he make Tan Siwei retreat without exposing the truth? This was a really troublesome matter. She thought about it and put on a more serious face. "Don't you think that a woman like me is very boring? I'm always working on cases all day, looking for clues suspiciously, or dealing with corpses. When I'm busy, I don't even have time to wash my face, let alone ask about other people's well-being. I'm not feminine at all. I don't know anything about zither, chess, calligraphy, or painting. Once I enter the kitchen, the stove will suffer. Last year, for my father's birthday, I specially cooked a bowl of longevity noodles for him. In the end, he had diarrhea for 3 days after eating it." Ning Shu spared no effort in making fun of herself. At the end of her sentence, she changed the topic. "Instead of a devil like me, why don't you find a gentle and virtuous lady from the boudoir who can give you a shoulder massage after work? How comfortable would that be, don't you think so? No, don't belittle yourself." Tan Siwei quickly shook his head. "Being a lady has its advantages, but Lady Ning, you're so sharp and intelligent that others can't learn from you. I don't think you're inferior to them. Moreover, I think you're very special. You're different from other girls." Zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting were nothing more than leisure activities. It was not important whether one knew how to play them or not. As for cooking, even if you don't know how to do it, I can learn. My mother said that I'm not good at other things, but I have some talent in cooking. Coincidentally, you and I complement each other." As he spoke, his face began to redden again. Ning Shu's first plan had failed, so she came up with another one. She threatened, "Haven't you heard the rumor that I've cursed 9 generations? Let me tell you, it's not just a rumor. It's true. Even my own aunt at home is afraid of me. My first 2 husbands died horrible deaths. The third one almost died as well. Tan Xiaoqing, I think you should seriously consider our marriage. What do you think? I know all of that. I've also discussed it with my father before going to the Duke's public house to make the decision to uncle and aunt. In fact, my reputation wasn't very good before. Before I became an official, there were many people who pointed at me behind my back. They said that there was something wrong with my brain and that I was a disgrace to the Prime Minister's public house. Therefore, I understand that you must have had a hard time in the past 2 years. You must be feeling uneasy. Don't worry, I won't go back on my words. That's not what I meant. Ning Shu spent a long time talking, but not only did she not make Tan Siwei afraid, but she also drilled 3 inches into a dead end. Her attitude was even firmer than before. She only felt that her heart was extremely tired. What happened to knowing the meaning of a string? This child was clearly a blockhead. Hui Mo was right. Her character was completely different from what the outside world said. Chapter 312. Just as Ning Shu was in a dilemma, she finally reached the end of the wooden stairs. Ning Shu took out the key she had plundered from the brothel keeper and opened the door. With a whoosh, she was greeted by the rapid flow of the Chaobai River. No wonder the procuress said that they had spent a lot of money and effort to fix it. The secret passage started behind the mural and ended at the embankment of the Chaobai River. If they opened the door with the key, they would reach the surface of the water 5 feet below. After sending the person here, they would use a small boat to quietly take the person away. Going downstream was faster than running. No wonder when Madame Feng returned home that day, Lord Feng was already waiting for her at home. The willows on the embankment were luxuriant and the shade was dense. It was a perfect cover for the secret passage. The procuress was indeed a cunning old fox. As expected, Ning Shu found a bit of dried blood on the door handle. The murderer should have entered the building from here and left quietly after the crime. If the procuress had told them the truth from the beginning, they could have saved at least half a day. Unfortunately, there were no IFS. The Southern Yang Kingdom gave them a total of 5 days, and the first day came to an end silently. There was no time and no need to be angry about what had happened. After locking the door, Ning Shu and Tan Siwei went back the way they came. The moment they stepped on the wooden ladder, the light in Ning Shu's hand flickered inadvertently behind the ladder. Wait, what's wrong? Ning Shu immediately turned around and walked to the back of the wooden ladder. She raised the lantern and squatted on the ground. Look, because this area is under the wooden ladder and no one has cleaned it, a thick layer of dust has accumulated over time. Only this small area is abnormally clean. It clearly has the shape of 2 feet, and the footprints are very clear. This means that someone must have secretly hidden here last night. As she spoke, she raised her head and looked around with her sharp eyes. She found a new clue. Also, half of the spider web here has been rubbed away by someone. Tan Shaoqing, can you help me see what this is? Tan Siwei hurriedly moved the lantern in his hand over to make the corner brighter. Soon, the two of them found a dark blue cloth on the nail behind the wooden ladder. When she came out of the secret passage, it was already late at night. Ning Shu's hands were full of dust and her body was covered in sweat. In order to save time, he originally wanted to spend the night at Xuanfang Station, but it seemed that he had no choice but to return home. Tan Siwei said enthusiastically, "Let me send you back. It's not very peaceful in the capital recently, and the curfew is over. I shouldn't let a girl like you walk alone at night. There's no need for that. I have a token on my waist, so I can move around unimpeded. Furthermore, I have someone accompanying me, so there's no need for you to trouble yourself." "How is this troublesome? I'm your fiancé. This is my duty." No need, no need. Yes, yes. Ning Shu refused again and again, but Tan Siwei insisted again and again. Ning Shu broke out in cold sweat. In the tug-of-war between the two, Tan Siwei accidentally missed a step and fell backward. Ning Shu subconsciously reached out to pull him back. Coincidentally, she wrapped her arms around his waist. It was a typical action of a hero saving a damsel in distress. Ning Shu. Awkward, extremely awkward. Tan Siwei. Excited, extremely excited. Ning Shu was just about to pull him back to his feet when she suddenly heard a deliberately low cough. She looked up and saw a group of people watching below Xuanfang Station. There were Tan Sixian, Xiao Zhongping, Ju Sai, Shi Yang, and Xiaoho Qing, who had just gotten off the carriage. She clearly knew that Xiaoho Qing couldn't see, but her hand suddenly became hot. She didn't care if Tan Siwei could stand still or not. Ning Shu pushed him into the arms of Hui Mo, who was watching from the side. She said guiltily, "Good evening, everyone. Long time no see, haha." Ning Shu was determined to cover up the matter just now. She couldn't let Xiao Qing know, but she didn't expect Xiao Zhongping to say, "It seems that Lady Ning and Tan Xiaoqing's relationship is really good. They are hugging and showing off their affection on the street. How enviable." "No." She hurriedly looked at Xiao Qing. "Your Highness, this is a misunderstanding." Chapter 313. On the other side, Ning Shu tried her best to prove her innocence. On the other side, Xiao Zhongping said carelessly, "Anyway, you and Tan Xiaoqing are already engaged. What does it matter if there is a misunderstanding or not?" Ning Shu was speechless for a moment. She quickly threw out a question to shut her mouth. "It's already so late. Princess, why are you here? The envoy died so mysteriously. As a princess, I have to be concerned." Xiao Zhongping turned to look at Xiao Qing. Her voice was full of undisguised sweetness. "Besides, I have Xiao Shizi to escort me. I'm not afraid even if it's late." "I see. Then I'm relieved that you're safe." Ning Shu continued to smile, but her heart was bitter. After standing up with Huemo's help, Tan Siwei was surprised to see the people who came. "Greetings to Xiao Shizi and 13th Princess." Then he looked at Tan Xixian, eldest brother. "Why are you here?" Tan Xixian smiled. His pair of peach blossom eyes narrowed slightly. His flirtatious look disappeared, leaving only an amiable look. "It's already 8:45. Seeing that you haven't returned home, I knew that you must be busy with the case. So I came to see you and brought some supper. I didn't expect to meet Princess and Shizi at the alley. Now it seems that I didn't bring enough." Xiao Zhongping said, "It doesn't matter. I heard from my 7th brother that there's a restaurant across from here. They roast mutton and their supper is also very good. Usually, I don't have the opportunity to come here. Why don't we go there and have a seat? Your Highness, what do you think?" Xiao Qing slowly lifted his thin lips. "Okay." So the group changed their route and walked together to Donglai. Tan Xixian pointed at Tan Siwei. The latter immediately excused himself and went to Donglai first. The boss of Donglai was ready. It was Xiao Zhangping's first visit to a brothel-like city. Everything was new to her and she looked around. Tan Xixian followed closely behind and patiently answered her questions. Xiao Qing followed behind. Seeing this, Ning Shu hurried to catch up. She explained to Xiao Qing in a low voice, "I definitely didn't hug Tan Xiaoqing just now. He accidentally stepped on air, so I pulled him up. It was completely to help those in distress, to help those in need, to be courageous, to help the weak." Xiao Qing sneered, "What a brave and righteous act, helping the weak. Should I praise you?" Ning Shu said embarrassedly, "That's not necessary. It's just a small matter." "You." Xiao Qing frowned and sneered. He sped up and left Ning Shu behind. "Hey, hey." Ning Shu tried to catch up, but she still couldn't catch up. His back had already followed Xiao Zhongping and Tan Xixian through the entrance of Donglai Shun. Ning Shu pouted and whispered, "What's so great about having long legs?" "Okay, it's really great. Aren't you so close to the 13th princess? You even escorted her all the way." After Tan Xixian welcomed the 13th princess and Xiao Qing into Donglai Shun, he stood at the door and waited for Ning Shu with a smile. When Ning Shu entered, the boss bowed obsequiously. "Eldest young master, are all the distinguished guests here?" "Yes, this humble one will serve the dishes. I guarantee that they will be the newest and best dishes in this humble one. Wait, there's also me." A 15 or 16-year-old girl wearing a lavender dress jumped down from the carriage that had just stopped. Seeing the girl, Tan Xixian frowned out of the ordinary. "Why are you here?" Chapter 314. The young girl bit her lips and said, "Only you and 2nd brother are allowed to wander around these brothels at night. Why can't I come? The more you don't allow it, the more I want to come. Cheung Wei, don't mess around. You should know that your 2nd brother is here to investigate a case. Today, I'm not here to look for brothels. I'm here to accompany the princess and the heir. Moreover, you clearly know that here. Tan Xixian stopped halfway and said in a low voice, it's already late. You should rest. I'll order someone to send you back to the residence. You can accompany your honorable self. I'm not here to see you, I'm here to see second brother. The young girl stubbornly said. Before Tan Xixian could pull her back, she had already run into the building like a wisp of smoke. Qiong Wei. Tan Xixian frowned deeply. In the end, he could only apologize to Ning Shu. I'm really sorry. I've made a fool of myself in front of Lady Ning. This is cousin Qiong Wei. Her parents died early and she has been staying in our residence since she was 5 years old. She has been spoiled by her family and doesn't even know how to greet people. Ning Shu casually waved her hand and said with a smile, it doesn't matter. People will only reveal their most willful and straightforward side in front of people they trust. This shows that although Miss Qiong Wei lost her parents, she has received the best protection in the Prime Minister's residence. The two young masters and your mother and father are very good people. The best protection. Under the colorful light above his head, his flirtatious peach blossom eyes couldn't see clearly. She only heard him say with his usual respectful and courteous smile, this Tan doesn't deserve such praise. As a result, this table of people who had nothing to do with each other somehow ended up sitting at the same table. Xiao Zhongping originally wanted to sit beside Xia Hoqing. However, Xia Hoqing refused because he wasn't used to sitting with others. Moreover, his eyes were injured and he didn't want to offend the princess. As a result, he could only sit alone. However, her seat was next to Xia Hoqing, so they could be considered close. Her eyes were practically glued to Xia Hoqing's body. Seeing Ning Shu come in, Tan Siwei smiled and stood up. He wanted to call her to sit beside him, but Xue Qiong Wei suddenly appeared and took his seat intimately. Zhongwei, why are you? Xue Qiong Wei said angrily, second brother, don't I usually sit next to you? Why can't it work now? Don't tell me you don't want me anymore after you're engaged. Of course not, it's just. Tan Siwei only hesitated for a long time before he was defeated by his cousin's tearful gaze. He could only let her be. There were only 2 chairs left at the square table. Tan Xixian and Ning Shu looked at each other. They were both confused as to why they were sitting together. However, under such circumstances, he had to sit even if he didn't want to. Otherwise, the situation would be even more awkward. Ning Shu had no choice but to force herself to smile at Tan Xixian and exchange pleasantries. Please sit, please sit. Just as Ning Shu was about to sit down, Xia Hoqing, who was next to her, took the wine cup that Ning Shu had just filled. For some reason, his hand slipped and the wine cup spilled down. It happened to spill onto the table in front of Ning Shu. The purplish-red wine dripped down the table and dirtied her chair. Xia Hoqing frowned and asked, Juicy, did I accidentally dirty the table and chair over there? Ning Shu didn't understand. She blinked and said, it's no big deal. Just wipe it. Tan Xixian was very quick-witted. He immediately followed up, Your Highness, don't worry. I'll order someone to clean it up. Xia Hoqing raised his hand and said, There's no need to make such a big fuss. It's almost midnight. It's better to have the waiter bring up the supper as soon as possible. As for the dirty table and chair, Xia Hoqing moved to the side. He reached out his white hand and patted the chair next to him. He said to Ning Shu calmly, The seat next to me is empty. Come and sit. Ning Shu was stunned. She lowered her head and smiled slightly. Before Xiao Zhongping could object, she had already sat down. It would be impolite for my daughter to refuse. Chapter 315. When Ning Shu sat down, Xiao Zhongping glared at her angrily. He looked like he wanted to pull her away from Xia Hoqing. Fortunately, the waiter served the dishes in time. Other than a few signature dishes, the rest of the dishes were filled with vegetables, dried fruits, and preserved meat. Ning Shu didn't have the appetite to eat meat at this late hour, so she only picked a few side dishes and ate casually. Opposite her, Tan Siwei raised his head and stole a glance at her. He said, Miss Ning. As soon as he opened his mouth, Tan Xixian laughed and joked, Brother, you're already engaged to Lady Ning. Don't you think it's a bit strange to call her that? Tan Siwei's face turned red. He summoned his courage and said, Shu. Just those 2 words made him sweat profusely. His ears were red as he brought the white porcelain cup that the waiter had just brought over to Ning Shu. I see that you haven't moved your chopsticks much. Are you sick of the fish? Why don't you try this cheese? I specifically asked the boss just now, and the boss said that it's hot and stuffy in summer, and this cheese is the most popular. After it was made, it has been kept in ice, and there's also fresh mint juice in it. It's cold and smooth, and the texture is very good. I think you'll like it. Before the cheese entered her mouth, Ning Shu already felt a chill in her heart. The cold air around the big Buddha next to her was enough to freeze her into a block of ice. Ning Shu quickly braced herself and said, Haha, there's no need. I'm not hot. I was born with a cold body, so I'm very cool. Xiaoqing, you can have it yourself. Tan Siwei didn't doubt her and said warmly, if that's the case, then I'll order someone to prepare a bowl of glutinous rice balls for you. I heard from Auntie that you like it very much. Waiter, please give me a bowl of glutinous rice balls with more preserved fruit. It must be hot. Okay. Before Ning Shu could stop him, the enthusiastic waiter had already rushed to the kitchen. After a while, a steaming hot glutinous rice ball was placed in front of Ning Shu. The corner of her mouth twitched. Under Tan Siwei's eager gaze, she stiffly picked up the spoon and took a bite. Tan Siwei asked, how does it taste? On such a hot and humid day, she ran back and forth between the east and west of the city, crawled in and out of the secret passage, and now had to eat scalding tang yuan. Ning Shu smiled happily. It's not bad. At the side, Xiahou Qing's voice was ice cold. He smiled like a cold jade and said, it's good, and he even put more preserved fruits. Naturally, the taste will be excellent. Since it's not bad, let's eat it all. Ning Shu felt as if there were daggers on her back, as if she had eaten coptis. Looking at the big bowl of hot tang yuan in front of her, she hated that if she had known this would happen, she would have taken the crispy cheese from the beginning. Tan Siwei took it as a compliment and lowered his head shyly. Xue Qiongwei snorted and rolled her eyes. She put the bowl of crispy cheese in front of her and muttered, pretentious. Tan Siwei hurriedly apologized on her behalf, and then reprimanded her in a low voice, Qiongwei, how can you be so rude in front of so many distinguished guests? You're not like this at home. Hurry up and apologize. You only love me at home. Of course, it's different. I'm not going to apologize. Qiongwei. Taking advantage of the quarrel, Ning Shu quickly picked out a dish that suited Xiahou Qing's taste. She put some in a small bowl in front of Xiahou Qing and said in a low voice, Your Highness, this dish of seasonal vegetables is more refreshing and palatable. Would you like to try it? Not to be outdone, Xiao Zhongping said, I think this dish is more nourishing. It won't harm the body even if it's used for supper. It's more suitable for Xiahou Shizi. Your Highness, please try it. 2 bowls were placed in front of Xiahou Qing at the same time. Ning Shu looked at his pale thin lips expectantly. She saw his thin lips move, and he said to Xiao Zhongping, Thank you, princess. His voice was like a cool breeze blowing on the morning moon, calm and gentle. Xiao Zhongping's cheeks were flushed, like a peony flower that had worked hard to bloom and was finally appreciated by her sweetheart. Her almond-like eyes were sparkling, and all that could be seen in them was Xiahou Qing's figure. One was the favored daughter of the heavens, the other was the Shizi of a Wang Fu that could shake the world. Looking at the pleasing interaction between the two, Ning Shu awkwardly brought back the bowl of unwelcome seasonal vegetables. She chewed 2 mouthfuls tastelessly and suddenly tasted bitterness. She frowned and chewed a few times before finally swallowing it. Chapter 316. It was just a simple supper, but it turned into a mess. Even Tan Sixian, who was good at dealing with people, had a headache. So, he asked casually, Brother, how is the investigation going? Have you found any clues? Tan Siwei gave up on lecturing his cousin and replied, You can say that we've found some superficial information. We found a secret passage in Xuanfang Station. Last night, The murderer probably used that secret passage to sneak into Xuanfang Station to commit the crime and then escaped. Tan Xixian was shocked. There is a secret passage in the Fang platform? We didn't know about it, and the procuress dared to hide it from us. If I had known there was such a big loophole, I would have persuaded the envoy to change the banquet to another place. But now it's too late to say anything. Brother, such a cunning person must be punished after the case is solved. Tan Siwei nodded. The punishment will be judged according to the law. But she is now writing a list of people who may know about the secret passage under the supervision of the bailiff. I believe it will be out soon. Ning Shu looked at Tan Xixian. Young master, are you interested in the case? Tan Xixian sighed. I have made friends with the envoy. Although we can't do business, I still hope that he won't die without knowing the reason. Ning Shu nodded in understanding. Xue Qiongwei suddenly lowered her head and let out a cold laugh of unknown meaning. But that laugh was very low, and only Ning Shu, who was sitting opposite her, could sense a wisp of illusory intent flashing through her lowered eyes. It was like a stone at the bottom of a pool that looked so clear that one could reach out and touch it, but was actually so far away. Tan Xixian frowned and looked at Xue Qiongwei. In the end, he let her be. There was a sound of knocking on the stairs. Someone hurried upstairs. It was Hui Mo. He was sweating and came in with a stack of paper. Lady Ning, the procuress has finished writing the list. I was next to her with a knife and stared at her writing. She was scared to death. I threatened her several times that if she dared to miss anyone, I would cut her head off. She cried and swore that she would never lie again. So, the list should be complete, but when Hui Mo was halfway through his sentence, he suddenly stopped as if he was constipated. He looked at one of the people in the room with a conflicted expression. It was as if he had encountered a huge problem. The problem was so big that he couldn't believe it. Seeing this, Ning Shu took the list from Hui Mo and scanned it from top to bottom. Finally, she found the reason why Hui Mo was so shocked at the end of the last page. Because clearly written on it was a name that should never have appeared here, Tan Siwei. When he saw his own name, Tan Siwei was also shocked. What is going on? I don't know. He looked confused and didn't seem to be faking it. Hui Mo and Ning Shu looked at each other and frowned. I asked the procuress. She said that slandering the courtiers is a big crime. She wouldn't dare to write anything even if she had 10 times the courage, so Tan Xixian's face was as tense as a string. She held Tan Siwei's hand and said, Siwei, think about it carefully. Don't cause any unnecessary misunderstanding. Tan Siwei also knew the seriousness of the matter. He frowned and thought for a long time. Suddenly, he understood and said, I understand. In the afternoon 2 days ago, Lord Feng said that he had something to do at home and left the Yamen an hour early. Later, the Ministry of Justice sent an urgent case to Lord Feng and asked him to send the official seal to the palace. I was planning to go to Feng's mansion, but the runner told me that he saw Lord Feng heading west. It was not the direction to go home. I remembered Lord Feng's little hobby. So, I went to Shi City and was directed to Xuanfang Station. I didn't expect that Madame Feng also heard the news and came here. Recalling the situation at that time, Tan Siwei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, Lord Feng begged me to cover for him, so I had to stay here for a while. But I was standing at the stairs and focused on when Madame Feng would come in and how I should stop her. I didn't pay attention to how the procuress took Lord Feng out of the building. I thought he disguised himself and sneaked out. I didn't expect there to be such a secret passage. But I was on the 3rd floor at that time. I can't deny that. Chapter 317. It could be seen that the procuress was frightened this time. She wrote a very detailed list of confirmed, probable, and even the slightest bit suspicious names. There were 60 to 70 people in total, and Tan Siwei was the weakest suspect among them, so it didn't explain much. However, according to the procedure, Ning Shu still had to ask one more question. May I ask where Shaoqing was last night? Tan Siwei said, he stayed overnight in the Yamen. Because His Majesty's birthday is at the end of the month, and it's his 50th birthday, His Majesty is preparing to give a general amnesty on that day to show his benevolence. He will pardon some of the criminals with lesser crimes and let bygones be bygones. Therefore, the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court have been busy compiling the list of criminals. Because the number is too large, many of my colleagues have been staying overnight in the Yamen to work so as not to delay His Majesty's important matters. I am no exception. Deputy Minister Zheng and Deputy Minister Xie can testify for me. Ning Shu nodded in understanding. If that's the case, Shaoqing doesn't have the time to commit the crime. Xue Qiongwei laughed mockingly and defended her brother. Nonsense, there's no motive. My second brother is doing well as the Shaoqing of the Supreme Court. Why would he want to kill that person? Don't make a name for yourself. If you really can't find the culprit, you want to pin it on my second brother. She spoke without thinking and was not polite to Ning Shu. Xiahou Qing, who had been silent all this time, frowned slightly. He said coldly, impudent. Tan Siwei knew the severity of the situation. He quickly put on a stern face and reprimanded, Qiongwei, this is the rule of handling cases. Don't mess around. You've been too rude today. Apologize to Lady Ning and the two princes. Xue Qiongwei's mouth was like a flying knife. Did I say anything wrong? She's already engaged to you, second brother. Why are you still doing this for? I don't think she's worthy of you. Bella, enough. Tan Xixian grabbed her and interrupted her. Then, he cupped his hands and bowed deeply to Xiahou Qing and the others. He said with an apologetic expression, my younger sister was rude. As her elder brother, this Tan has failed in his duty and disturbed eldest Miss Ning and your highness's mood. This Tan is deeply ashamed. This Tan will take her back to the residence and discipline her well. I will definitely come to apologize another day. After saying that, he immediately pulled Xue Qiongwei to the meeting. Xue Qiongwei still didn't realize her mistake. When she got up, she bumped into the table, causing all the dishes on the table to sway. The other dishes were fine, but the bowl of hot glutinous rice balls was placed in front of Ning Shu and was very close to her. When the table shook, the bowl of boiling soup slid off the edge of the table and splashed all over Ning Shu. Ning Shu didn't even have time to react. A hand reached out from the side in time to grab her waist and pull her to the side. The colored glaze lanterns above her head spun like stars. When she felt the strength of that hand and the fragrance of duheng wafting over her face, Ning Shu realized that she had bumped into someone's embrace. The owner of the embrace purposely turned around and protected her in his embrace. Not even a drop of soup splashed on her. Her forehead bumped against his chin, and her lips slightly pressed against his collarbone through his clothes. All she could see was his shockingly white neck and bulging Adam's apple. How could this person's Adam's apple be so beautiful? It simply made her want to. The next moment, she regained her senses and hurriedly stood up from his embrace. She asked worriedly, Your Highness, how are you? Did you get splashed? Let me see. Chapter 318. Before Ning Shu could finish her sentence, Xiao Zhongping had already pulled her away from Xiahou Qing, yelling, Xiahou Shizi, are you scalded? Are you all blind? Bring me a towel and ice water. Xiahou Qing took back his hand without a care. He said calmly, Don't worry, princess. It's not a big deal. It's just that my clothes are wet. Please allow me to go back and change. He didn't allow Xiao Zhongping to object and made the decision for her. Juicy, take some people and escort the princess back to the palace. Yes. Xiahou Qing left first. Xiao Zhongping didn't force him to escort her no matter how indulgent he was. He looked at Xiahou Qing for a long time and said reluctantly, Then your highness should go back first. If you're scalded, you must tell me. I have the best ointment for burns in the palace. Tan Xixian was ashamed that his cousin was making more and more trouble. He personally sent Xiahou Qing out of the building. Xue Qiongwei also knew that she was in the wrong. She kept her head down and let her brothers scold her. Then, she was taken back to the palace. Tan Siwei's face was full of embarrassment. He said anxiously, My sister isn't usually like this. I don't know what's wrong with her these days. Also, what she said just now was definitely not what I was thinking. Please don't misunderstand. She's just too spoiled at home and doesn't know her limits. I promise I won't let her offend you again in the future. Your sister is closer to you. It's understandable that she doesn't care about her appearance because she wants to protect you. Don't worry, I won't blame her. As for splashing the soup just now, it was unintentional. After the incident, she was so scared that her face turned pale. Xiaoqing, you should go back and comfort her. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. Before Tan Siwei could finish, Ning Shu had already hurried downstairs and chased after someone. The scene of Ning Shu being protected in Xiao Qing's arms surfaced in his mind, as well as her unconcealed worry. Tan Siwei opened his mouth, and a trace of gloominess flashed in his eyes. In the end, he stopped chasing after them. When Ning Shu ran out of Donglai Shun, Xiao Zhongping was still at the door. When he saw her, he immediately reached out to stop her. The unruly princess, who had always been unpredictable, raised her chin and said with her flower-like lips, Ning Shu, since you are engaged, it doesn't seem appropriate for you to deliberately get close to child Xiaoho. Normally, Ning Shu would be thick-skinned and let her taunt her. But today, at this time, Ning Shu did not want to be inferior to her in this matter. She looked sharply at Xiao Zhongping. The princess is also waiting to be married off. Is the Southern Yang's future crown prince's consort settled? You. Xiao Zhongping gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, don't forget, I have already reached an agreement with child Xiaoho. The marriage won't affect me at all. If I, Xiao Zhongping, truly admire someone, I dare to boldly say it out loud and let everyone know. Do you dare? On one hand, you cling to child Xiaoho, and on the other hand, you have an engagement with Tan Xiaoqing. Ning Shu, you really make me look down on you. I dare. Facing her face full of ridicule and disdain, Ning Shu raised her clear eyes and said calmly but firmly, I dare. Before I turn 17, I won't marry anyone. On the day I turn 17, I will personally tell him that I admire him. Other than him, I won't marry anyone else. Your Highness, farewell. After Ning Shu finished speaking, she did not argue with her and immediately lifted her robe and ran in the direction of Prince Namping's mansion. Fortunately, Xiaoho Qing's carriage did not move quickly today. Shi Yang's carriage was so slow that it was almost comparable to the old madam's stroll. He was so resentful that he kept panting. Finally, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. Chapter 319. Ning Shu ran all the way and finally caught up to Xiaoho Qing's carriage. Shi Yang made a sound. Before the carriage stopped, Ning Shu had already lifted the curtain and climbed up. Hearing her movements, Xiaoho Qing's face was like a lone goose flying over a distant mountain. At first glance, there were no ripples, but his brows slightly moved as he said, What's the matter? Ning Shu was slightly panting. She was worried that the carriage was too fast and she couldn't catch up. She didn't expect to be overjoyed. I'm fine. I just want to see if you're okay. I already said, I'm fine. She didn't believe it. She clearly saw him deliberately put his hand behind his back. Ning Shu didn't answer. She knelt down beside Xiaoho Qing and grabbed his wrist. Xiaoho Qing didn't expect her to be so reckless. Before he could take back his hand, she had already pulled up his sleeve and he saw the obvious red mark on the back of his hand. His hand was slender and white, which made the burn look particularly ghastly. Ning Shu's brows wrinkled. She bit her lip and said, How is it fine? It's clearly such a big burn. People had 5 senses. If one of them was missing, the other senses would be more sensitive to compensate. For example, people with eyesight often had better hearing than normal people. But he had lost 3 senses. He only had hearing and touch. With the hot soup spilling on his body, the burning pain would be several times higher than normal people. This person was still stubborn. He was willing to die to save face. She quickly took out a piece of ice from the restaurant to cool down his wound. The ice had melted a lot along the way. There was only a small half of it left in the cloth. Fortunately, it could still be used. She wrung out the excess water. She held him with one hand and gently put the ice on the back of his hand with the other hand. After a while, she was afraid that it would be too cold, so she took it away and continued to apply it, concentrating. He couldn't see her expression at this moment, nor could he smell her scent, but with his 2 remaining senses, He could clearly feel that she was intimately leaning against his side with her head slightly lowered. She must have run very quickly just now, so she was still slightly panting. Her warm breath followed the rise and fall of her chest and blew on his arm. His right hand was carefully held in the palm of her soft hand. Her hand was so small that as long as he turned his hand, he would be able to hold her hand firmly in his palm, and then he suddenly felt a strange burning sensation in his chest. Xiahou Qing, who had always been cold and distant, lost his composure. He understood what was going on and immediately withdrew his hand. That's enough. However, Ning Xu misunderstood. Ah, is it too cold? I'll blow on it for you. Don't move. She pulled his hand back again, lowered her head, and gently blew on the back of his hand half an inch away. They were so close that it seemed like her lips would touch the back of his hand at any moment. The fluctuations that he had been suppressing surged once again. Xiahou Qing reached out to touch her forehead. He almost frowned in irritation. His voice was slightly hoarse as he hesitated to speak. Do you know that you what? Xiahou Qing did not say a word. After a while, he took the ice from her hand. He turned his head and said, It's nothing. I can do it myself. You, go sit over there. Ning Xu looked at him in confusion. She didn't know what kind of problem this arrogant and cold young master suddenly had. She rubbed her forehead that he had touched and obediently sat in the seat across from Xiahou Qing. The carriage was silent for a moment. He and she did not speak. There were only the scattered lights outside the window and the moonlight that intertwined with each other. It was accompanied by the sound of the rolling waves of the Chaobai River that entered the carriage. Under the ambiguous light and shadow, Ning Xu stared unblinkingly at Xiahou Qing across from her. She looked at his face that was even more handsome and fair under the moonlight, and at his lips that were even more clearly sculpted by the moonlight. Her heart was beating wildly, and her mind was completely at ease. She was a 300-year-old soul. She had taken a liking to his 20-year-old beauty. Was this considered an old cow eating young grass? Her eyes moved and inadvertently fell on his throat. Her heart suddenly became restless. She couldn't be blamed. She could only blame this grass for being too delicious. It made people want to, what do you want to eat? Hearing Xiahou Qing's puzzled question, Ning Xu finally realized that she had accidentally spoken her thoughts out loud. Fortunately, her voice was soft and he didn't hear it all. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. It's nothing. I'm just saying that compared to the restaurants outside, the food in the king's palace is more refreshing and more suitable for this kind of hot weather. I miss it after not eating for a day. Hey, why do I hear the sound of arguing outside? I'll go take a look. Ning Xu stuck her head out the window. She had only wanted to pretend, but she didn't expect that under the hazy moonlight, she would see two people arguing 10 zhong away under the dense shade of the trees. Those two people were not strangers. They were Tan Xixian and Xue Chengwei, who had been sitting at the same table. Chapter 320. Because there was a distance between them, the sound of their quarrel could not be heard clearly. Only bits and pieces of words were carried into Ning Xu's ears by the cool night wind. Chengwei, don't come to this place in the future. Also, don't casually look for your second brother, do you hear me? Why? I'm already of marriageable age. You can't control where I go or who I look for. Furthermore, I don't want to do anything. You were so obvious today. Do you think I didn't see through it? Also, when you asked your second brother out, do you think you hid it perfectly? Chengwei, your second brother is already engaged and will get married soon. Do you have the heart to destroy his happiness? Have you forgotten how well your second brother treated you since you were young? Mother, although, at least she didn't treat you badly. That's right. Aunt treats me very well. Do you know that she's preparing to betroth me to Count Zhengyong's Zhu family's famous lecherous son? How can that be? When I return home, I'll plead with father and ask him to stop this matter. If you stop this, then there's the next one. There are millions of people in the capital and hundreds of thousands of families. Big brother, do you want to stop them one by one? Big brother, I'm not a child anymore. When I was of marriageable age in spring, you personally inserted the hairpin into my hair. I can tell who really treats me well and who only treats me perfunctorily. I'm not very smart since I was young. I'm not good at studying and I'm also bad at needlework. My personality is also stubborn and I'm not liked by anyone. It's as if there's nothing I can do except for my stubbornness. My life is already so messy. The only thing I want to do is to do my best to protect the person I love. Even if he doesn't have me in his heart, I still want to try. Otherwise, I'll regret it when I die. Big brother, don't try to persuade me anymore. Cheung Wei, don't go down a dead end. The current situation isn't what you think it is. Those things already have nothing to do with you. Just forget about it. Big brother promises you that no one will be able to. Under the hazy moonlight, Tan Xixian reached out her hand to stroke the top of Xue Qiongwei's head, but Xue Qiongwei dodged her. Enough. Being a cowardly good person may not be a good thing. On the contrary, you may end up with nothing. It's better to be a pure evil person. I can only promise you that unless the situation is absolutely necessary, I don't want to hurt anyone, and I won't. The siblings quarreled for no apparent reason. In the end, Xue Qiongwei lowered her head and grabbed Tan Xixian's sleeve as if she was crying. Separated by some distance, Ning Shu was unable to clearly see Tan Xixian's expression at this moment. However, from the way he gently pulled Xue Qiongwei into his embrace, it was not difficult to guess that his eyes were filled with heartache. After crying, the two of them left the small alley. They should be heading back to the manor. Ning Shu was confused. However, it wasn't appropriate for outsiders to ask about other people's family matters. She just didn't expect Xue Qiongwei to have such deep feelings for Tan Siwei. No wonder she deliberately targeted him at the dinner table. However, after the two of them left, they still didn't hear Ning Shu's voice for a while. Xiahou Qing asked, "What are you thinking about?" Ning Shu came back to her senses and said, "Nothing, I just feel that it's a bit strange. From the dinner table until now, what I've heard from the three Tan siblings seems to be very different from what I've always known. The Prime Minister's wife has always been quite famous in the circle of noblewomen in the capital. Everyone praises her as a virtuous wife who treats her servants with great generosity. However, why does it sound so unreasonable from Xue Qiongwei's mouth? The relationship between the eldest young master and the second young master is quite good. Previously, when Dong Lai Shun raised the suspicion of the second young master, the eldest young master was very anxious. In the conversation just now, he had been siding with the second young master. However, from the eldest young master's tone, why do I feel that he is very unfamiliar with the Prime Minister's wife? Especially when he said the word mother, there was an obvious pause. Afterwards, when he tried to stop the marriage, he directly said that he was pleading with the Prime Minister and not directly admonishing the Prime Minister's wife. They are clearly mother and son, why is it like this? In response to Ning Shu's question, Xiahou Qing quickly answered, they are not mother and son, but the eldest son of a concubine and his DI mother. Ning Shu was shocked, is that true? How come I don't know about this? Hasn't the Prime Minister's manor always announced to the public that the two young masters are the legitimate children of the Prime Minister's wife? Not only did she not know, there were probably not many people in the capital who knew about this. Xiahou Qing leisurely said, the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's wife married in the 3rd year and 6th month of Heaven's selection, but in reality, the eldest young master was born in the 4th year and 1st month of Heaven's selection. Even if he was born prematurely, there has never been a case of someone who was born 3 months prematurely and luckily survived. Therefore, there can only be one explanation. The eldest young master was born from the Prime Minister's mistress and was later brought back to the Prime Minister's manor to be raised. Ning Shu couldn't help but admire him. This monster with a photographic memory, was there anything in the capital that he didn't know about? Ah, so that's how it is. Then my previous question can be clearly explained. Similarly, it could also be explained why Tan Xixian, who looked cultured and refined, knew when to advance and retreat, and was more tactful than Tan Siwei, didn't become an official. Instead, he became a merchant of the lowest class. He was born into the Prime Minister's family, and he was the eldest son. The people below him looked at him as if he were in the clouds, unreachable. Only he himself knew that the steps under his feet were made of mud and not solid. His birth mother was unknown, and he lived with the awkward identity of his legitimate mother. No matter how tolerant and magnanimous his legitimate mother was, in the end, she couldn't compare to her own son. If he wanted to climb up, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't step on the wrong step. If he stood still, it would be easy for him to become a target and be shot through the heart. If this person was mediocre, then it wouldn't be so bad. He would just muddle along for the rest of his life. But if he was a little outstanding, then he would have to spend every day racking his brains and tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Therefore, Tan Six Ian, who was stuck in the cracks of the wall, had to hide his inadequacies even if he was as talented as Li Bai. In comparison, entering the business world was the safest path. His attitude was gentle, and he was thorough in all aspects. It could be imagined how difficult the road he had walked before was. Chapter 321. Ning Shu had been released from prison. She didn't need to use the identity of a little guard of Prince Nanping's mansion to deceive people. Naturally, she would return to Duke Xing's mansion. Shi Yang stopped the carriage. Before getting off, Xiahou Qing said, "Yi's family will be sent to you tomorrow morning." "Well, thank you, Your Highness." Ning Shu didn't stand on ceremony with him. She pulled her robe and jumped off the carriage. Xiahou Qing's voice came from behind again, "Wait." Ning Shu looked back in confusion. The voice in the carriage stopped. After a while, he said casually, "I didn't touch that bowl of food." Understanding which bowl of food he was referring to, Ning Shu's feather-like eyelashes fluttered. She couldn't help but smile in her eyes. She said softly, "I know." Xiahou Qing kept his word. The next morning, Yi's family was taken to the Supreme Judiciary. In the center of the court, the mother and daughter hugged each other tightly like two frightened quails. They didn't dare to raise their heads. It seemed that the people standing around them were not officials, but ferocious ghosts. Or maybe there was no difference between the two in their eyes. Yi's father was a lame man with a crutch. He looked sloppy. He directly shrank in the corner and didn't dare to move. He only dared to scold his daughter. He was full of words like money-losing goods, shame on the ancestors, unlucky and so on. Hearing her father's curses, Li Yi's face became more bleak. She was like a flower that had been hit by frost. She was almost withered. Her eyes were full of tears. Until a Yamen runner came to her and took her into a side hall next to the court. There was a person sitting inside. He didn't wear the uniform of an official. Instead, he was like a guard's uniform. He was thin and had a kind face. He was vaguely familiar. As soon as he saw her come in, the person immediately showed a warm smile. He poured a cup of tea for her and told her not to be afraid. "Hello, Miss Yi. I didn't ask you to come here today to embarrass you. I just want to ask you something. Do you still remember me?" Li Yi hesitated and said, "You are." The man smiled and gave a hint. "May 9th, Chaobai River." Li Yi finally remembered. "Are you young Master Ning Ping?" Ning Shu nodded with a smile. "Yes, it's me." Miss Yi has a good memory. In such a terrible place, she met a familiar person who had saved her life. Li Yi's heart was full of fear and vigilance. She lowered a lot at once. "You're my benefactor. How can I forget you? But why are you looking for me, specifically, for what?" "It's about a case. I don't know if you've heard about the sudden death of the Southern Yang Kingdom's envoy before dawn yesterday." Hearing the question, Li Yi's body stiffened, and she immediately shook her head and said, "No, never. I don't know anything." When ordinary people heard the question, no matter whether they knew the answer or not, they would think for a moment first. She answered so quickly that she blurted it out without thinking. Instead, she revealed an obvious flaw. Ning Shu was not in a hurry to expose her, but continued, "Well, I heard that Miss Yi often sells flowers there last time, so I want to ask if Miss Yi knows the surrounding situation better. Maybe you can help us find some clues." Li Yi said like a frightened bird, "Not often. I usually sell flowers in Shui City. I only go there occasionally, so I don't know." Ning Shu stared at her and said slowly, "I didn't say where the envoy of the Southern Yang Kingdom died, nor did I say where it was. Why does Miss Yi seem to know it so well?" Li Yi's face changed. She pinched her palm hard and didn't dare to look at her eyes. It's me. It's a misunderstanding. Because I often walk in Shui City, and there are many people coming and going in Shui City. It's a place where peddlers like us wander and peddler. The envoy certainly didn't die there. I don't go to other places much, so. She hesitated for a long time, pinched her palm harder, gritted her teeth and said, and I went out of the city with my parents the day before yesterday and went back to my hometown. I don't know what happened after that. If Benefactor has other things to do for me, I will do my best. But I really don't know anything about this matter. Listening to her flawed defense, Ningshu's pupils reflected her trembling, delicate and helpless figure. It was hard not to have a trace of pity in her heart. She hadn't seen her for a few days, but this young girl who had been torn apart by the wind and rain had lost a lot of weight. Her face was pale without a trace of blood. Just sitting there, her body seemed to be full of sadness. But before the case, all emotions must be put aside. So she had to harden her heart and continued, when was it the day before yesterday? At noon, the uncles and aunts in the square can testify for us. Ningshu shook her head gently. Since you left the city at noon, why did people see you wandering in front of the Fang-seeking platform in the evening? Chapter 322. A thin layer of paper could barely hold on in the hurricane, but it still could not escape the fate of being exposed. Hearing Ningshu's words, Li Yi was completely panicked. I don't know what you are talking about. I left the capital at noon the day before yesterday. My parents, yes, and my villagers in my hometown can testify for me. They all saw me go back in the carriage. What Xuanfang station, what murder case, I really don't know. What does the death of the envoy have to do with me, a flower girl? Ningshu glanced at her fingernails that were almost broken, pursed her lips and said, about this, I have investigated. Your villagers did see you and your family go back in the carriage, but your mother said that you were not feeling well and could not meet people, so you did not get out of the carriage to greet your villagers. When you reached the door of the house, you wore a curtain hat and went back to the house directly. So, no one can be sure that the person who went back was you. Your witness can't fool the government. I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just that you have always insisted that you don't know who bullied you. Do you really not know? There are a lot of brothels in Shi City, and many of the girls there suffer from unmentionable diseases such as sexual intercourse. Therefore, many people come to you to buy jade hairpin flowers. I asked Miss Susu, and she immediately said your name, which means you have been to Shi City a lot. Ever since the envoy entered the capital, he would spend 20 days in Shi City every month. Such a high-ranking official, his appearance was different from the people of Great Yu. Many people even went out of their way to take a look at him. If an ordinary person had heard of the envoy's name, and he appeared in Shi City, they would be able to guess that he was the envoy. In addition, the scene of you bumping into the envoy and being entangled by him happened to be seen by Boss Chen in the nearby brothels. When you ran away, you even scratched him. The envoy was so angry that he chased after you. The scratches on the side of his neck are the evidence. So, don't hide it anymore. You know everything. Took a deep breath and raised her head. Tears streamed down her face. Benefactor, you saved my life before. I'm very grateful to you. You were the one who told me not to die first and to continue living. Maybe I can find some fun in living. I listened to you and didn't continue to commit suicide. I even knelt down and begged my father to bring us back to our hometown. I want to forget everything here. But why did you force me like this? You might as well have let me die from the start. In the face of her pearl-like tears, Ningshu felt that she was simply a great evil person. She took out a handkerchief from her sleeve and handed it to her, but it was forcefully knocked away by and fell to the ground. Ningshu paused for a moment and retreated to a place where was not so disgusted. She said softly, I didn't say that you must be the murderer. I just want to know what you did at the Fang platform that day. After crying with all her might, wiped away the tears on her face and said hoarsely, yes, I know that he was the one who bullied me that night, but I'm just a humble girl. I'm like a tiny ant in the capital. Anyone can step on me. Even if I'm bullied, what can I do? Report it to the officials? He's a foreign envoy. How can I fight against him? Perhaps our family of 3 will die because of this matter. That's why I didn't dare to say anything. Even though I knew everything, I didn't dare to say a single word to anyone because there was no one in this world who could help me. Until I met you. You persuaded me to forget about this matter and move to a new place to live. I also wanted to, but in the dead of night, whenever I thought of that matter and that disgusting face, I couldn't help but want to pounce on him and cut him into 1,000 pieces. I can't sleep night after night. I'm not reconciled to the fact that the person who ran away with his tail between his legs is not that evil beast, but me. So that afternoon, after we drove away from home, I secretly ran to She City. I wanted to see what that beast looked like before I left. I wanted to engrave him in my mind. When I die in the future, I will turn into a malicious spirit and take his life. Ning Shu said, so, you just watched from the side and didn't plan to do anything else? Er's eyes looked to the right. I originally wanted to perish together with him. But I didn't expect that he had so many guards around him and there were so many thugs at the Fang platform. It was too difficult for me to sneak in and kill him. Someone else noticed me, so I left after watching for a while. I didn't expect that he was killed at night. When I heard the news, I was very happy. I thought that he must have done too many evil things. God couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to punish him. Chapter 323. Ning Shu looked at her without blinking. Where did you go after that? Stopped sobbing and said, it was a little late at that time. I didn't have time to leave the city, so I stayed in a nearby inn. I left the city and went back to my hometown at dawn. When did you leave the city? A little after 5 o'clock. I can't remember the details. Looking at the girl who was not more complicated than paper, Ning Shu shook her head gently and said, you probably don't know that people are very strange animals. When people are recalling something, their eyes will often look to the left unconsciously. When they lie, their eyes will subconsciously look to the right. You lied just now. You said that you were very happy when you heard the news that the envoy was killed. But you left the city at 5 o'clock. The pimp found the envoy's body a little after 7 o'clock and reported it to the official. How could you know the envoy's death 2 hours in advance and then leave the capital? Li Yi's eyes were in a mess. She said excitedly, I only knew that he was killed later. I left the capital early not to escape, but because I knew that I didn't have the ability to kill him. I gave up. I was afraid that my father and mother would worry about my safety, so I left so early. As for the news that he was killed, I heard it from a passerby on the way. You said that you planned to die together with the envoy. Then, how were you going to kill him? I prepared a dagger. Where is the dagger now? Er's lips trembled. Her tears were like broken glass beads. She was heartbroken. I lost it. That evening, when I realized that I didn't have the ability and courage, I ran to the Chaobai River and cried for a long time. Then, I threw the dagger into the river. I'm so useless. I'm a coward. In the end, I still implicated so many people. My father was right. I should have died earlier. In the side hall, she fell into sad and depressed crying again. Ning Shu glanced at the handkerchief that had been knocked to the ground by her. After thinking for a while, she walked forward and used her clean sleeve to wipe off her tears one by one. I believe that you didn't kill him. However, the death of an envoy is indeed a difficult matter for the imperial court. Therefore, I'll have to trouble you and your family to stay in the capital for the time being. It will be more convenient for us to interrogate you. Is that okay? Cried silently for a long time. She nodded and was brought out of the side hall by the bailiff. After she left, Hui Mo poked his head out from behind the door and wondered, Lady Ning, do you really believe what she said? Ning Shu shook her head gently. I don't believe you. She must be hiding a lot of things from us. But if she doesn't want to talk, we can't force a confession out of her. Hui Mo frowned. I don't think so. After all, she is the first victim. Ning Shu glanced at him and said, Oh, our brother Huemore has learned to be gentle with women? Huemore blushed. No, don't spout nonsense. I'm just defending the injustice. All right, Let's be serious. She left the capital at a sensitive time. Since she dared to come back without telling her parents, there's no way she was afraid that her parents would be worried, so she rushed back. Especially her father, TSK. Ning Shu curled her lips in dissatisfaction. So there are only two explanations for this matter. Either she's the murderer, or she knows who the murderer is, and that person told her in advance to leave the capital to avoid suspicion. However, judging from her character, she can't even hide her fear by telling a lie. How could she set up a perfect set of murder and then escape? Unless her acting skills were so good that they were at the peak of perfection. And did you notice what she said at the end? She said, "I'm a coward." In the end, I implicated so many people. If she only referred to her parents, why did she say so many people? Huimo suddenly understood, oh, right. Hey, why didn't I find so many flaws? So, someone must avenge her. This case is definitely not committed by one person. There are at least two people. Last night, I found blood, a piece of cloth scraped by a nail, and a pair of footprints in the secret passage. Judging from the size of the footprints, it was left by a man. The bronze lock can only be opened and locked from the inside. But when I went there yesterday, the lock was still locked. If the murderer did come in and out from the secret passage, it could only be the people on the third floor who conspired with outsiders. Now, more and more people have come to the surface. I'm a little excited just thinking about it. Chapter 324. Huimo was confused and asked in confusion, "Isn't it just Iya? Who else is suspicious?" Ning Shu sat down and poured herself a cup of tea. She drank it leisurely and said, "The procuress and Susu are all lying. Don't you notice it?" "Really?" Huimo patted his head and tried to think, but he was still confused. "Why do I feel that they are crying? Although the procuress was not honest at the beginning, she told me everything later. The list is very detailed. She was crying and writing at the same time. It doesn't seem like she is lying. Lady Ning, don't keep me guessing. Just tell me." Ning Shu raised the corner of her mouth and said, "Beg me." Huimo didn't even think about it. Please. Ning Shu." This begging came too fast. She didn't feel any sense of accomplishment at all. She should learn from your young master's arrogance. It's more interesting to tease him. She couldn't help but remember that when she was a guard in Lord Pingnan's mansion, she was serving that young master. He was sitting and eating while she was standing. After serving him, it was her turn to eat. He seemed to be doing it deliberately. The more her stomach growled, the slower he ate. She was so bold that she took away the hairpin that he used to tie his hair. "Your Highness, do you want this hairpin?" "Beg me." Then Xiahou Qing coldly twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "I will only say it once. Give me the hairpin and comb my hair again." Ning Shu was almost crazy after being tortured by him in the past few days. She also became stubborn. "What if I don't?" "Your Highness, I already know that I was wrong about stealing the letter and running away to meet Princess 13 in private. I have also copied the rules as punishment. Your Highness, shouldn't you calm down and stop torturing me? You offended me and threatened me with the hairpin. Is this the result of you admitting that you were wrong?" Ning Shu curled her lips and said, "I was forced to a dead end. Your Highness, please forgive me." That day, he didn't cover his face with that black satin, so his eyebrows and eyes were completely exposed. He was quiet for a while, his thick eyebrows and long eyelashes rippling like the clouds in the distant mountains. After a while, he said, "Does taking care of me make you so impatient? Since that's the case, you don't have to come to the unknown hall from tomorrow onwards. Do as you please." After he finished speaking, he stood up. His ink-dyed hair was no longer restrained by the hairpin, and it swayed with his footsteps. Ning Shu's heart immediately shrank, and she nervously chased after him. "No, it's just the desire for good food. It's human nature. It's really uncomfortable to watch you eat while I wait for you. Don't go." Okay, I'll go over. I'll immediately comb your hair." She was in too much of a hurry and accidentally stepped on her own robe. As she fell forward, she unconsciously reached out to grab his robe. Then, there was a soft sound. Xiahou Qing's robe was pulled askew by her, revealing his snow-white shoulders and a small part of his back. Her eyes immediately widened. Tian Wen's head popped out of the window, and then immediately retracted. The rest of the guards, including Ju Sai, all turned their heads and didn't dare to look at her. This was the first time she saw Xiahou Qing so flustered and exasperated. Then, she stood under the flower corridor with the birds for an entire afternoon and copied the rules of the palace 50 times. Hui Mo suspiciously looked at her face, slowly turning red. He squatted down to look at her. Ning Shu quickly recovered. She coughed and put down the teacup. Then, she began to unravel the mystery. From the beginning, the procuress was trying to hide the location of the secret passage. When she was exposed, she confessed. Then, she pulled our attention to the customers who knew about the secret passage. Don't forget, the procuress herself is the biggest suspect. As the boss of Xuanfang Station, no matter where she went or what she did, no one would suspect her. At the same time, the case was now being deliberately linked to Xue Hongyi, who had died more than 20 years ago. Coincidentally, she was an old acquaintance of Xue Hongyi from more than 20 years ago, so she was very clear about the case. Why didn't she say anything when she found the body of the envoy? As for Miss Susu, her lies were even more obvious. She said that she had a hidden disease. On the 7th of May, she couldn't serve the envoy because she was unwell. The envoy returned in disappointment. But on the 12th of May, the envoy asked her to serve him again. After that, he was disappointed again and even slapped her. Think about it. The envoy clearly knew that she had a hidden disease and it was impossible for her to recover in just a few days. Why did he ask her again? Does she really have such great charm that it has to be her? Hui Mo thought carefully and said, "Oh my God, yes. Then let's immediately take these two people out and continue to interrogate them. We won't be able to get anything out of them. The procuress will definitely say that too much time has passed. She is old and frightened, so she can't remember at once. Susu will cry and say that she did it to earn money to support her disabled parents. Unless we can find more and more clues, we can't pry open their mouths." However, she was still optimistic. In short, since Yi is the source of this case, as long as she is still in the capital, we will have a chance to follow the vine to the melon. By the way, I asked Tianwen to investigate her friends or close friends. Do you have any clues? Chapter 325. Hui Mo is an honest child. He says honestly, "Oh, I've checked it. Li Yi's family has a simple relationship. She has no relatives in the capital. Her father used to be a street gangster. Later, his leg was broken and he became a night-fragrant man. Her mother is an ordinary rural woman. She is very honest. She usually does needlework for the neighbors to make a living. Since Yi was 12 years old, her father didn't go out to work. He relied on his daughter to sell flowers to make money. He drank and gambled all day long. He lost as much as Yi earned. When he was drunk, he would scold his wife and daughter. His reputation in the street was very bad. However, Li Yi was not stained by the mud. She didn't learn from her father's bad habits. Instead, she became graceful and polite. She had a good relationship with the people in the market. When she was selling flowers, if she saw that the business of the store was not good, she often helped to sell flowers. That's how Li Yi met her fiancé. The two families were engaged and were going to get married next month. Unexpectedly, something like this happened. I heard from the aunt in the street that when Mr. Ju heard that she had an accident, he ran to comfort her. Who would have thought that the next morning, he asked the matchmaker to cancel the marriage. Li Yi chased him to his house to ask for an explanation. Mr. Ju didn't see her and drove her away. That's why Li Yi couldn't think it through and tried to kill herself again. In my opinion, this man is really a two-faced coward. Li Yi's infatuation is in vain. Li Yi is really unlucky. Her father is unreliable and her fiancé is heartless. Hui Mo is still nagging. Ning Shu is dizzy and asks him to stop. She sips the tea and quietly organizes her thoughts. Suddenly, a feather floats in her mind. She says, "What's the name of Mr. Ju?" Why do you ask about this heartless man? Hui Mo feels funny. You don't suspect that he will kill people to avenge Li Yi, do you? Just tell me what his name is. Hui Mo turns over the booklet that Tianwen gave him. Let me see. Zhu Xiong. This guy is called Zhu Xiong. Hey, where have I heard this name? Ning Shu's eyes sink. She immediately puts down the cup in her hand, grabs Hui Mo and leaves. Hey! Where were they going? My neck is going to break. Being dragged away by the collar, Hui Mo covered his neck and rolled his eyes. Walking quickly to the entrance of the Supreme Court, Ning Shu nimbly mounted her horse and said, Go to Dong Lai Shun. If I'm not wrong, he's the waiter who delivered the roast mutton the night before yesterday. You're asking Zhu Yang? That brat was fired by me. When the boss of Dong Lai Shun heard that the government was looking for Zhu Xiong, he quickly distanced himself from the matter. He came to work in my shop a month ago. At that time, my shop was doing very well and was in urgent need of manpower, so I asked someone to introduce a reliable worker to me. You also know that it's easy for people to gossip about my shop, but I pay a high salary. Many people want to work for me, but I don't like them. I saw that he was young and strong, and he was good-looking, so I kept him. At first, he worked hard, so I thought he was a good young man. But I didn't expect that he would start to slack off. First, he ignored my words and stayed in a daze all day long. Later, he tried to find a way to escape by urinating or defecating. He only came back after half a day. I paid him a high salary, but he was only hired by me. Who would be willing to do that? Detective, you saw that I scolded him fiercely yesterday, but this kid was too much. I was so busy in the shop that I didn't even have time to rest. He went out to deliver the roast mutton, but he disappeared. I don't know where he went to hide. Now my shop is affected by the murder case, and I can't make ends meet, so I fired him last night. Ning Shu immediately extracted the important information and asked, The roast mutton you're talking about, is it the day before yesterday when His Highness the 7th Prince wanted to eat roast mutton, so you sent someone to cook it and deliver it to him? Yes, it's that time. The person I sent wasn't him, but another worker. That worker was walking when he tripped. He was standing by the side empty-handed. I thought that I couldn't let the noble wait for too long, so I sent him. Aren't you suspecting that his Ayo, my dear grandmother, no matter what this kid does, it has nothing to do with me? The boss's fat face turned into a walnut green. Chapter 326. Hui Mo couldn't wait and asked, When did he come back? Did you notice? Let me think about it. Detective, please wait a moment, let me think about it carefully. The boss's face was sullen, and he was so worried that tears were about to fall. He only felt that he had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. It seems to be a little more than 1/4 past midnight. When he came back, his face was covered in mud. I asked him what happened, and he said that he fell into a pit. I thought that I didn't have time to let him go back to take a bath and come back to work. It was about time to close, and he looked so disgusting, so I sent him to the kitchen to light the fire. After midnight, the last batch of guests also had supper, so I asked the staff to pack up and leave. When is the closing time? After midnight, it's about the same time every day. Ning Shu said again, so from midnight to midnight, he has been in the kitchen all the time? It should be. I can't guarantee the specifics. You know, as a shopkeeper, I have to serve the guests all the time. I'll call the chef for you. He has been here all the time. Please wait a moment. The boss had a bitter face and hurried to the kitchen to find the chef. Hui Mo stood in the same place and gritted his teeth angrily. I didn't expect Zhu Yang to be so good at hiding. He almost got caught under the light. Let's send people to post notices everywhere to arrest him, especially at the city gate. We must not let him run out of the capital. Ning Shu knew that he was not angry with Zhu Yang, but because she almost missed an important clue because of a little negligence. Ning Shu patted him and said, he can't escape. His blood relatives are still here. Li Yi has returned to the capital now. If he really wants to avenge Li Yi, then he will take the initiative to appear in front of us now. After the chef came, he confirmed that the boss was right. Zhu Yang had been there during that time. After closing, Zhu Yang didn't say where he was going and just ran away. Another worker gave him a clue. When he met Zhu Xiong yesterday morning, he saw that he was in a daze. His face was also very ugly, as if he had just encountered something serious. However, when he was asked, he did not say anything. Before leaving, Ning Shu asked again, "Do you still remember what color and style of clothes Zhu Yang was wearing that night?" After everyone recalled, they said, "The style is the short brown that we wear the longest when we work. There's nothing special about it. The color is dark blue, right? It's old clothes." The color of the clothes matched the color of the strip of cloth again. Taking the opportunity from Donglai, Ning Shu and the others continued to rush to Chongwen Lane where Zhu Xiong lived. They almost caught him, but unfortunately, he ran away one step ahead of them. When the news reached Li Yi's ears, she was sitting in front of the dressing table, weaving a rui knot. Her hands were very skillful, and the style she made was much more exquisite than the ones sold on the market. It was in the shape of a flower. After she finished weaving, she tied the rui knot on the sachet she made herself, and it became a very beautiful sachet. After she was done, she stared blankly at the sachet for a long time. Then, she personally tore it apart and made a new one. She repeated this process over and over again, as if she was possessed. Tears fell from her eyes silently. Li Yi murmured, "Mother, people can't do anything wrong. Once you do it, you can't wash your hands clean anymore." Li Yi's mother hugged her tightly. "Darling, what are you talking about? This matter is over. Didn't you see that the officers have already released us? That beast is already dead. You didn't kill him. Don't think too much, Li Yi." Li Yi's tears continued to fall silently. She closed her eyes and shook her head in despair. "I can't get over it. I can't get over it forever." Li Yi's mother's face suddenly changed. Her dry lips trembled and almost cracked. "Is it really you? Darling, don't say anything. Do you hear me? Don't say anything." Almost at the same time, the prison of the Supreme Court that held the suspects in the case of the envoy's sudden death creaked open. Several suspects were stuffed inside. Among them, in the cage where Susu, the procuress and the others were locked, a servant girl was pushed in by the officers. The servant girl knelt on the ground and wailed. Susu saw it and couldn't bear to help her up. She comforted her in a low voice and asked her why she was locked up. The servant girl cried and answered, "I sell dumplings on the street outside the West Market. The envoy passed by my food stall the day before yesterday evening and ate my dumplings without paying. I argued with him for a while. The officers said that I was also a suspect. Will I be beheaded? I'm so scared." The other girls in the cage felt the same way. They turned their backs and wiped their tears. The procuress looked at her pitiful face and gave her a handkerchief to wipe her face. The servant girl took the handkerchief with gratitude. Not long after, she got along well with these people and sweetly talked to them. This servant girl was none other than Forsythia. Chapter 327. Hearing that Ning Shu had arrived, Tan Siwei immediately went forward and said, "Li Yi is here to surrender. She said that she killed them." Ning Shu jumped down from the horse and wiped the sweat off her forehead with her sleeve. She frowned. Did she say why she killed them and how she killed them? Tan Siwei's face was also gloomy. She only said half. She said that the envoy humiliated her, so she wanted to take revenge. However, she refused to say how she killed them. She only said that she wanted us to convict her and cut off her head to report to the emperor. Li Yi's motive was sufficient, but she couldn't say how she killed them. Even if she wanted to use her as a scapegoat, would the emperor be able to accept it? Would the southern Yang be able to accept it? No one was a fool. This girl must have heard about the search for Zhu Yang and came to take the blame. However, if she surrendered now, even if she wasn't guilty, she would be implicated. Ning Shu threw the horsewhip to Huemore and thought for a while. "Get ready. Zhu Yang will be here soon." Tan Siwei nodded. "You must be very hot after running back and forth. Previously, when you were in prison, you said that you liked to drink plum soup to relieve the heat. We have prepared some in the side hall. One is cooled and the other is not. Shu, Do you want some? Tan Siwei looked at Hui Mo and said, Hui Mo has some too. Hui Mo said cheerfully, I also have some. I want to drink it. I like plum soup the most. Ning Shu's temple twitched and she immediately glared at him. Hui Mo quickly shut his mouth and stood behind Ning Shu obediently. Ha, ha, ha. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. As soon as he finished speaking, Xue Chengwei came out and said unhappily, I brought the plum soup for you to relieve the heat. Why should I give it to them? Seeing that she was still here, Tan Siwei frowned. Chengwei, didn't I just ask you to go back home? This is an important place in the Yamen. Ordinary people shouldn't stay here. Why are you so disobedient? Did you forget what I said to you last night? Am I an ordinary person? I'm your cousin. We grew up together. Xue Chengwei's eyes were filled with grievances, and a thin layer of tears appeared in her eyes. And if I leave, how would I know that you're going to use the plum soup I gave you from afar to please another woman? You're really infuriating. I won't leave unless you drink all the plum soup. Seeing that the brother and sister are about to quarrel, Ning Shu and Hui Mo quietly go around them. When they reach Xue Chengwei, Hui Mo accidentally touches her with the horsewhip in his hand. Xue Chengwei dodges like she gets an electric shock and takes 2 steps back. Her face is very ugly. What are you doing? Her reaction was so big that everyone's eyes turned to her. Hui Mo was confused. He looked at the horsewhip in his hand and quickly apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't pay attention when I was walking and offended you. I'm sorry. Xue Chengwei paused for a moment and said angrily, I know. You must have done it on purpose. You want to teach me a lesson for Ning Shu. Stay away from me. Tan Siwei hurriedly mediated. Chengwei, Hui Mo has already explained. He really didn't do it on purpose. Don't misunderstand. Let me see. Besides, he didn't hurt you. Don't be unreasonable. It's better if Tan Siwei doesn't speak. Xue Chengwei felt more wronged. Tears fell from her eyes. You're still speaking for them. Second brother, you're not married yet, but you're ganging up to bully me. Stay away from me. All of you stay away from me. After that, Xue Chengwei covered her face and ran back to the side hall to cry. Tan Siwei had a headache. He had to ask Xue Chengwei's maid to follow and serve her. He said in distress, I'm really sorry. Hui Mo, Shu, please don't take it to heart. I don't know what's wrong with this girl. She's become more and more eccentric recently. I can't control her. Hui Mo was speechless. I just touched her accidentally. You don't have to act like I molested her. There was no Qi Juanyu in the capital, and now there was Xue Chengwei. There was another fierce general on the list of unruly ladies. Ning Shu said, it's okay. Miss Ji Yu is just a teenager. She's just throwing a tantrum. But when did Xiaoqing say recently? Tan Siwei thought, you're not even 17 years old. You're not much older than her. But he still told the truth, about 5 or 6 days ago. After I went to the Duke's mansion to propose marriage to your parents. Ning Shu smiled and said, maybe it's because she suddenly found out and couldn't accept it for a while. Speaking of which, Miss Biao is really sincere to Xiaoqing. On such a hot day, usually a delicate young lady would hide at home and not go out, but Miss Biao came so far to send Xiaoqing a plum soup to relieve the heat. It was the same last night. It was already late at night, but she still rushed to Xuanfang Terrace to visit. Xiaoqing, sometimes the wind and rain hurt the spring. Why don't you take pity on the person in front of you? Tan Siwei opened his mouth and hurriedly explained, it's not like that. There's nothing between me and Chengwei. Please don't misunderstand. While Tan Siwei was hurriedly clarifying, an officer from the other side of the carriage ran over and reported, Xiaoqing, Lady Ning, Zhu Yang has appeared. He's standing at the door. Tan Siwei knew what was important in the face of official business. He put aside the small talk for a while and immediately said, bring him in. Chapter 328. In the court of the Dali Temple, the tall and silent young man named Zhu Xiong finally took the initiative to step into the Dali Temple after tricking the officers and searching almost half of the city. As the boss of Dong Lai Shun said, his appearance was indeed acceptable. His skin was a healthy wheat color, and his shoulders were broad and thick. If he changed into a set of clothes, Yong Chengwei could also do it. Compared with the vicious murderers in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Zhu Xiong did not look evil. Instead, he showed a simple and honest feeling. However, from the moment he walked into the Dali temple to the moment he was forced to kneel on the ground by the officers, he kept his head down and did not open his mouth. Looking at the silent young man for a long time, Ning Xu's eyes sank and she slowly opened her mouth. Zhu Xiong, do you know that the officers outside are searching for you? Zhu Xiong finally opened his mouth and his voice was a little hoarse. I know. Ning Xu raised her chin and ordered the officers who were holding him to release him. She sat on the chair and picked up the teacup. Then why did you send yourself to the door after escaping? Zhu Xiong raised his head and his eyes were heavy. Surrender. I killed the envoy. You release Er. This was the first time Ning Xu had seen a murderer who went straight to the point and did not waste any words. She was interested and asked, you said you are the murderer, and also said she killed the person. Both of you insist on your own words, so why should I believe you? Zhu Xiong's expression was very calm. He threw a pair of boots from the bag in his hand. If you don't believe me, you can take this pair of boots and compare it with the half-bloody footprint on the terrace. See if it's mine. After looking for the footprints for a long time, Hui Mo did not expect that he would finally get a clue at this time. He immediately compared the footprints he had made before with the pair of shoes and said in surprise, it's a complete match. It seemed that the murderer was indeed this person. This case was unexpectedly solved so quickly. It was simply overjoyed. However, Ning Xu did not reveal an overly excited expression. She nodded, and a moment of thought flashed past her eyes. After that, she said leisurely, even if you turn yourself in, how can you guarantee that Li Yi did not participate and conspire with you? Zhu Xiong's dead face finally showed the expression of a living person, and he was very excited. No one conspired with me. From the beginning to the end, everything was done by me alone. Yi is so cowardly, she didn't even dare to tell me who the bastard who humiliated her was. I only found out after listening to Boss Chen's gossip when I went to Dong Lai Shun to work. How could she possibly conspire with me? Let her go. If you want to kill someone, kill me, Ning Xu said, don't be agitated. Since you said that you did it alone, then tell us the details of the crime. If you can justify yourself, we will consider whether to accept your testimony and let Li Yi go. Zhu Xiong lowered his head and clenched his fists. Then, he took a deep breath and began to narrate, after I found out that the bastard humiliated Yi, I have been holding back my anger, the kind of anger that made me want to kill someone. It happened that I was working in Dong Lai Shun. A few days in advance, I heard that the envoy was going to hold a banquet at the Xuanfang Terrace opposite our restaurant. At the same time, when I was serving a drunken guest, I happened to hear him boasting about the tigress who came to catch him. He escaped from the Xuanfang Terrace through the secret passage, causing the tigress to catch nothing. I learned that there was such a secret passage in the Xuanfang Terrace. It was really a blessing from the heavens. This opportunity was too rare and too perfect. I began to secretly plan how to find an opportunity to kill him without anyone knowing. Our restaurant's roasted mutton is good. Every day, there are guests at the Xuanfang Terrace who order for us to deliver it. It is not difficult to enter the building, but there are people guarding the stairs on the third floor, so it is not easy to go up. The first time I delivered roasted mutton to a guest inside, I noticed that the seventh prince's carriage had just arrived. So I deliberately slowed down by 2 steps and walked behind the seventh prince while holding the roasted mutton high. As expected, the seventh prince turned around to look at me. After the first delivery, I went back to the restaurant to wait. I wanted to see if my little trick would work. I didn't expect it to work. Ning Xu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So Xiao Yunsan's reputation as a glutton was already known. What was this? The indirect cause of the envoy's death was a piece of meat in Xiao Yunsan's mouth. He deserved to be beaten by His Majesty. Chapter 329. Zhu Xiong continued, I used a little trick and snatched a second chance to enter the search Fang station from someone else. It was that time that I saw my enemy up close and overheard that he was going to stay at the Search Fang station tonight. So, I had a plan in mind. After delivering the roast mutton, I took advantage of the fact that the guards were not paying attention and quietly ran into the secret passage to unlock the door. After that, I pretended that nothing had happened and walked out of the Search Fang station, continuing to do my job. It wasn't until after midnight that I quietly came to the entrance of the secret passage in a small boat and went upstairs. Then I committed the murder. Tan Siwei said thoughtfully, "How did you know that the envoy would come out in the middle of the night? If he didn't come out and stayed in Miss Susu's room, what were you going to do? Weren't you afraid that people would notice you and expose you?" Ju Yang said numbly, "I didn't want to leave anyone alive. I prepared a lot of drugs. When the time came, I would blow them all into the room and then kill them all one by one." Hui Mo, who had been listening carefully, widened his eyes in horror. He felt that this person was crazy. Miss Susu is so innocent. How could you do this? Ju Yang raised his head and his eyes were bloodshot. If she didn't buy flowers with Ia that day and insist that Ia send the flowers to such a messy place, Ia wouldn't have met that beast and wouldn't have encountered such a thing. People who were blinded by anger would also have extreme thoughts. Ning Shu waved her hand and told Hui Mo not to waste time arguing with him. She asked, "What happened after that?" "Go on." Ju Yang said mechanically, "I had prepared the drugs and was about to ignite them. I didn't expect that God would help me. He ran out by himself and got drunk on the balcony. I didn't even notice him when I walked over. Oh, you see, even the King of Hell thought that he deserved to die, so he gave me such a good opportunity. How could I miss it? So I did it. I drugged him first, then took out the knife that I had prepared beforehand and stabbed him again and again." Seeing him widen his eyes in horror, but unable to resist, I don't know how happy I felt in my heart. Ning Shu frowned slightly. "Why did you choose that kind of modus operandi? The restaurant has a lot of customers coming in and out every day. There are a lot of drunkards and prostitutes. When I was serving them, I would listen to them chatting. Once, I heard them talking about the murder that Xue Hongyi committed more than 20 years ago. When I decided to take revenge, that old case somehow popped into my mind. I thought, if I could push the blame of the murder onto Xue Hongyi's ghost, then wouldn't I be able to escape unscathed? No one would suspect a restaurant waiter like me." Ning Shu's eyes sharpened. "How did you copy the key?" Ju Yang said with a stiff face, "I used to be an apprentice in a locksmith shop. These locks are a piece of cake for me." Tan Siwei immediately waved his hand and ordered someone to investigate and report back. Not long after, they did indeed find the information, proving that what he said was true. The Minister of Supreme Court who was listening at the side immediately said, "Shaoqing, we can now report to His Majesty that the case has been solved." This case was like a sword hanging over their heads. Without finding the murderer, everyone was scared witless and couldn't eat or sleep in peace. Now, Ju Yang took the initiative to stand up and admit his crime. Moreover, the material evidence was here. The motive and the process of the murder were all explained clearly. If it wasn't him, who else could it be? The heavy burden on their shoulders could finally be put down. However, they heard Ning Shu's clear voice again. "Sir, please wait a moment. There are still a few points of doubt. Please allow me to finish asking." The Minister of Supreme Court showed a look of objection, but Ning Shu didn't have time to care. She pondered for a moment and said from another angle, "You said that you committed the murder alone. You entered and escaped through the secret passage. Then how did you manage to lock the secret passage from the inside? Do you have a doppelganger technique?" Ju Yang's face showed a brief moment of shock, but he quickly calmed down and flatly denied, "I didn't say that I escaped through the secret passage. It's like this. I was afraid that others would know how I committed the crime, so I locked the secret passage again after I entered. Then, after killing the envoy, I jumped from the balcony into the Chaobai River. This way, no one would know how I got in and out. It's more like a ghost's work." However, that moment of panic didn't escape Ning Shu's eyes. Her gaze became sharper. The balcony was nearly 10 feet above the river. "Aren't you afraid of being hit by the water when you jump from that height?" Ju Xiong lowered his eyes again and gritted his teeth. I've been good at swimming since I was a child, so I'm not afraid. Moreover, my fiancé has been humiliated like this, and the neighbors are all talking behind my back. How can I bear it? Now that I have my revenge, even if I jump into the river and die, it's worth it. Let go of This matter has nothing to do with her. I did it all alone. Ning Shu didn't stop at all. She pressed on step by step. I'll believe that you're good at swimming. However, you seem to have forgotten one thing. In order to enjoy the scenery on both sides of the river, Xuanfeng Terrace was built on top of a 7-story high platform. The 7 steps added together are more than 10 feet long. This means that even if you want to jump from the balcony, you won't fall into the water. Instead, you'll fall to your death on the high platform and become a pile of minced meat. Chapter 330. Zhu Yang's face was buried so that no one could see his expression, but his voice was still confused. I used something. Yes, there were a lot of bamboos on the terrace. I used the flexibility of the bamboos to swing. There were also trees. There were a lot of big willows planted on the riverbank. I first jumped on the willows, then jumped into the river. Ning Shu had already seen through him. She slowly shook her head. Impossible. I checked every single one of those bamboos. I didn't find any traces of the leverage you mentioned. As for the willows you mentioned, tell me which one you jumped from. Jumping from such a high place, there must be traces of broken branches. I will immediately send people to search for it. Being completely forced into a dead end by Ning Shu, Zhu Xiong's mouth opened and closed, as if it was gagged. For a long time, he was unable to speak again, and a fine layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. After a long time, he weakly and vaguely said, "At that time, I was panicking after killing someone, and the sky was completely dark. As for the specifics, I don't remember clearly." Ning Shu stood up and walked in front of him. She looked at him deeply and said, "Is it because you can't remember clearly or because you can't make up a lie anymore? Zhu Yang, you said that you did this case alone, but you can't hide from this point. Now, there are only 2 possibilities. Either you conspired with others, or the murderer isn't you at all. It's me. I did it all by myself." Zhu Yang raised his knees excitedly. He wanted to rush to Ning Shu, but the runner next to him immediately pressed him down. This seemingly simple and honest young man was like a crazy wild bull. His eyes were red as he shouted, "Aren't you in a hurry to solve the case? Aren't you looking for the murderer? It's me. Don't implicate others." Ning Shu saw pity in him. She said, "I'll ask you one last question. Do you hate the envoy so much that you pierced 9 holes in his body?" "Yes, I hate him. I want to cut him into pieces." Ning Shu had already understood what was going on. She sighed softly, "You're wrong. There weren't 9 holes in his body, there were 8. Are you going to say that you were too emotional to remember? You spent so much effort to kill the person you hated the most in your life. You must have remembered every stab you made on him. How could you be wrong? In addition, you said that you drugged him and stabbed him with a knife that you had prepared beforehand. However, you neglected one point from the beginning to the end. The real cause of death of the envoy was not a knife wound. Zhu Yang, stop lying. You didn't kill them. You turned yourself in just to take the blame for However, not only will you not be able to save her, you will also be implicated." The deputy couldn't take it anymore and immediately retorted, "How could he not be the killer? Then what's with this pair of shoes? Also, he was once an apprentice in a locksmith shop, and you deliberately sneaked into the Fang seeking station. These are all traceable. Even if he wasn't the one who killed them, he was still an accomplice. I understand now. Li Yi must have conspired with Zhu Yang. Zhu Yang opened the lock and Li Yi killed him. After killing him, Zhu Yang left and Li Yi locked the door. Then, she disguised herself as a girl from the Fang seeking station and sneaked out." No matter what the deputy said, Zhu Yang only clenched his teeth and insisted that there was no accomplice. He did it all alone. He was so stubborn and refused to reveal anything else. Ning Shu's throat was smoking, but there was nothing she could do. She could only let the bailiffs take him away for a trial. When Zhu Yang was handcuffed and taken out of the court, Tan Siwei thought for a while and asked, "Why did you go to Donglai Shun to work a month ago?" Zhu Yang, who had been charging forward like a war horse, twitched his eyes. "After a long time," he replied, "to earn money. We were supposed to get married next month, but my family has always been poor. I couldn't give Li Yi a lively and beautiful wedding. I couldn't even afford a decent bridal head ornament, so I could only paint the outside of the copper jewelry to replace gold." Although Li Yi didn't say it, I felt guilty. Coincidentally, I heard that Donglai Shun was recruiting workers. Although the reputation there wasn't good, the salary was high, so I went. I thought that I would only work for 2 months. Even if I couldn't earn a full set of gold head ornaments, I could at least buy a gold hairpin. I couldn't let her suffer too much. On the night of the 7th day of the 5th month, Li Yi went to the Fang Seeking Station to deliver flowers to Miss Susu. I happened to meet her. We hadn't seen each other for a few days, so I pulled her to a corner and secretly talked for a while. Drip, a tear finally fell from his reddened eyes. Then, he raised his rough hand and slapped his own face. "Actually, it's all my fault. If I hadn't pulled Li Yi to talk, she might not have met that bastard. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I'm the one who deserves to die the most." It was just a slap, but it left a bloody palm on his face. It represented his deep regret. Huemore's nose turned sour when he saw this. He couldn't bear to look away. Chapter 331. Except for Tan Siwei, everyone in the Dali Temple agreed with Li Yi and Zhu Yang's conjecture of conspiring to kill. Even Minister Feng Zheng, after hearing that there was evidence and that the culprit had confessed, couldn't wait to go to the palace to report the good news to the emperor. Ning Shu argued strongly, but it was difficult for her to resist the war of words of so many people. She knew that this case was like a sword on a beam and a rope around the neck. Everyone related to it couldn't wait to get rid of it. Especially now that someone had taken the initiative to confess, it was simply a great thing that couldn't be asked for. However, this little Ning Shu actually bragged about the so-called truth and axiom. She simply overestimated herself. A deputy minister sneered at Ning Shu and said, "Eldest Miss Ning, this official knows that you want to learn from your master and become a female Zhuge goddess. You want to make a name for yourself, you want to shake the 9 regions. But don't forget, you are first and foremost a citizen of the Great Yu state. This case is extraordinary, 5 days will pass in a flash. Do you want to ruin the fate of the entire Great Yu Empire for your own reputation? Or do you want to see with your own eyes the scene of the common people dying tragically under the swords of the Southern Yang Empire, the scene of millions of corpses?" Ning Shu straightened her back, her eyes were as clear as water. She fearlessly welcomed the questioning from all directions. "Daren thinks too highly of my daughter. Isn't my daughter's reputation already bad in the 9 regions? Why do I need to make a name for myself? If I really want an undeserved reputation like Daren said, I dare to ask Buddha to immediately strike me with 5 thunders. However, Daren, there are so many flaws in Zhu Yang's testimony. Anyone with ears can distinguish it. Just based on that pair of shoes, it can only prove that he was at the scene of the crime. How can it prove that he participated in the crime? And Li Yi can't even say the process of the crime. Just based on our subjective assumptions, isn't it shirking responsibility and fabricating an unjust case? Do you dare to raise your head and look at the 4 words justice written by Emperor Gaozu on the screen wall of the Dali Temple? The deputy minister's face was red with anger. He stretched out his hand and angrily said, "A hen takes charge of the morning. With a witch like you here, my Great Yu is doomed." Hui Mo stepped in front of Ning Shu and said sarcastically, "Because of you old fogies and hypocrites, Great Yu is going to perish." On one side was his peer, and on the other side was his sweetheart. Tan Siwei stood in the middle and was in a dilemma. He tried to ease the tension many times, but it was useless. Amidst the noisy debate, Feng Zheng, who had always pretended to be deaf and mute, half opened his eyes and slowly said, "Justice and justice are the principles of the world. We dare not worship them and worship them as if they are gods. It's just that this old man is old, so today I'll take advantage of my seniority and ask Lady Ning, which is more, 2 or 1 million?" Ning Shu had a vague feeling that he wanted to say something, but she had to answer, 1 million. Feng Zhang continued, then 2 lives and 1 million lives, which is more, which is less? Ning Shu silently clenched her fist. Under the sky, above the earth, millions of people in the world only have 1 life each. Ning Shu thinks that 2 people and 1 million people should not be compared, and should not be compared, because no one has the right to take away another's life without any reason, and even more unable to decide the life and death of another. Feng Zheng's presbyopic eyes finally opened completely. There was some appreciation in his eyes, and then he continued to ask, then I'll let you make your own decision now. If there was a choice in front of you, to sacrifice yourself and save the country, including all your family in this country, what would you choose? Her palm clenched even tighter, and there was a painful taste. Ning Shu's eyelashes trembled violently. Her voice was incomparably hoarse, but in the end, she could not help but follow her heart, country. Chapter 332. That's right, Feng Zheng laughed, closed his eyes and nodded happily. First there is the country, then there is the family, after the family, there is the continuous and endless succession of children. If you can exchange the smallest sacrifice for the biggest reward, why not do this deal? In front of millions, tens of thousands of lives, is the justice of 2 people really that important? Even if the gods want to strike us with lightning, it will strike the dozens of heads of our Supreme Court. As long as the other people can be safe, what's wrong with us stubborn and pedantic old bones being the bad guys? If we are struck by lightning and broken into pieces, let it go with the wind. It can be considered as an apology for the 2 of them. But Ning Shu's heart was filled with unwillingness, and indignation for Li Yi and Zhu Yang. These rich and complicated emotions all condensed into a long exhale from Ning Shu's mouth. She calmed down. The moment of wavering had been stomped out by her feet, and she found her unique firmness again. Lord Feng, Southern Yang gave me 5 days, and now only a day and a half has passed. To close the case so hastily like this, isn't it a bit too rushed? Does Lord Feng have so little confidence in the Supreme Court? Please believe me and let me continue to investigate. Before the 5 days are up, I will give this case a satisfactory result. I, Ning Shu, will do what I say. Seeing this, Tan Siwei immediately stood up and bowed. Lord, Lady Ning solved the 2 major cases of Phoenix Terrace and Shenqing Temple. You have seen it with your own eyes. Do you still have doubts about Lady Ning's ability? This official also vouches for her with the black veil on my head. She will definitely be able to solve this case. Lord, please don't report this case to the Emperor for the time being. Feng Zheng's gaze fell on Ning Shu for a long time, and then looked at Tan Siwei. He fell into a long period of hesitation, and finally shook his head. This case is too big. This official is unable to bear the responsibility. Why don't we report the details to His Majesty, and ask His Majesty? Ning Shu's heart jumped. If this was reported to His Majesty, then Li Yi and Zhu Yang would definitely have no way to live. There's no need to report. Li Yi is not involved in this case. A clear and cold voice came from outside the courtroom. Ning Shu immediately responded and looked back. She saw Xiahou Qing, dressed in a frosty robe, unhurriedly step in with Juice's support. Seeing him, Ning Shu's eyes couldn't help but light up, and she took a few steps towards him. Hearing Ning Shu's voice, Xiahou Qing tilted his head slightly at her and replied, the corner of his lips curled up slightly before he continued to speak to Feng Zheng. On the night of the incident, Li Yi knelt in front of the Buddha statue in Da Xianghua Temple for the entire night. A novice monk saw her at midnight and advised her to leave, but she knelt until the next morning before leaving. One of the deputy temple heads immediately said, "Has that little monk been watching her all this time?" The envoy died between midnight and the next morning. Even if she was indeed at Da Xianghua Temple at midnight, she could have rushed to Shi City to kill people after that. Ju Sai helped Xiahou Qing into the room. Feng Zhang yelped. Seeing this, he wished he could give the chair under his butt to Xiahou Qing. Fortunately, Xiahou Qing didn't like that seat. He sat on the side and slowly asked a question. How far is it from Da Xianghua Temple to Xuanfeng Terrace? How many roads are there? Ning Shu only thought for a moment before she understood what he meant. She smiled slightly and relaxed. Chapter 333. Tan Siwei took the roadmap of the imperial capital from the bailiff and dipped the brush in ink. There are 3 routes in total. The first one is to go south from Da Xianghua Temple, cross the bridge to Zhuqiu Street in the city, then turn left and go west through Shishirai Street to reach Shi City. The second one is to take Qintai Road to Yugong Street, then continue west through Chongren Lane to Xuanfang Terrace on the other side of the river. The last one is to take a boat from Zhuqiu Street to go west along the river. If you walk, the second route is shorter, but it will still take at least 2 hours. If you take the water route, the journey is shorter, but going against the river is more than twice as slow as walking, and the time spent will be longer. In other words, even if Li Yi took the second route, it would take at least 3/4 of an hour to reach Shi City. It would be impossible for her to sneak into Xuanfang Terrace, kill people, and escape in the remaining 15 minutes. The deputy was still unwilling to give up. What if it was a carriage? Wouldn't a carriage run much faster than walking? Xiahou Qing took the tea that Feng Zheng personally served, took a sip, and put it aside. A carriage is even easier to investigate. A poor person like her definitely can't afford a carriage, so she can only hire one from outside. Strangers meet by chance, and after business is done, they will part ways. As long as a reward notice is posted on the street, the coachman will definitely sell her out. Moreover, don't forget that there are night patrols in Yongchengwei. The carriage is so long from Da Xianghua Temple to Shi City, the possibility of it not being discovered is almost zero. With irrefutable evidence, if they forcefully put the blame on Li Yi, then they would be violating justice in broad daylight and creating an unjust case. The last person who raised doubts silently shut his mouth. Feng Zheng nodded and said, if so, then this case indeed has nothing to do with Li Yi. However, Zhu Xiong is still a suspect, so forgive me for not letting him go. Ning Shu nodded in understanding. Feng Zheng bowed slightly and said, I will have to trouble Lady Ning to solve this case as soon as possible. I will entrust this case to you on behalf of everyone in the Supreme Court. Ning Shu also curtsied in return, Sir, you are too polite. This is my duty. After being busy for half a day, Li Yi was finally cleared of suspicion. As for Zhu Yang, if they continued to interrogate him, they would eventually get new clues. The people in the court dispersed. Ning Shu exhaled and walked to Xiahou Qing with stars in her eyes. Thank goodness Your Highness came in time. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do. Xiahou Qing supported his forehead with one hand. Aren't you usually quite eloquent and good at talking back to me? Why are you so scared now? Ning Shu lamented, isn't this a case of 2 fists being no match for 4 hands? Random fists can kill an old master. I, the old master, was killed by 8 hands, 10 hands, and 12 hands working together. Useless. Ning Shu didn't mind at all. With His Highness here, what can I do? The corners of Xiahou Qing's mouth curled up in an imperceptible arc. On the side, Tan Siwei looked at the natural and harmonious atmosphere between the two. His eyes darkened slightly. He walked forward and showed a polite smile. Sir Feng has agreed to let Li Yi out first. However, she will inevitably be beaten 20 times for disturbing the court. However, I will instruct the officers to beat her as gently as possible. Your Highness, Shu do you think we need to interrogate her again? Ning Shu pondered for a moment and then said, after the punishment, can you ask Shaoqing to make an exception and let me take her to see Zhu Xiong? Tan Siwei showed an awkward expression. According to the law, it is not allowed. However, all right, Shu wait for a moment. I will be back soon. Chapter 334. Not long after, Tan Siwei brought Li Yi in person. After being beaten, her face was pale. But compared with her body, her soul should be more painful. Her eyes were full of complicated sadness. She looked more withered than when Tan Siwei saw her in the morning. Benefactor, why did you save me? This case started from me. I have sins that can't be washed away. Please let me end this case. Don't investigate anyone, and don't arrest Brother Ju anymore. He is a good man. Except for my mother, he is the best person to me in the world. Ning Shu said, I don't know what you are thinking, but I can tell you one thing clearly. Ju Xiong may know something, or he may have conspired with others, but he is not the one who killed you. Li Yi's tears stopped. He didn't kill me. You will know when you see him later. Tan Siwei took the token of Shaoqing and ordered the guard to open the door. Hearing that Li Yi was acquitted, Ju Xiong was stunned for a short time. At first, he suspected that it was a trap for him. Until he saw Li Yi standing in front of him, he was willing to let down his guard. They hugged each other and cried across the cold and rusty iron prison. Hui Mo rubbed his nose and felt that the current situation was incredible. So the current situation is, Li Yi thought that Ju Xiong killed her, so she came to turn herself in. Ju Xiong bowed his head and confessed in order to protect Li Yi. Are these two people out of their minds? Are they fighting to confess this crime? Ning Shu looked at the two who were licking each other's wounds with tears in their eyes and said, love is not something that can be judged by common sense. It can make people feel sweet, but it can also make people feel heartbroken. It can drive people to the end of the road, but it can also make people feel bitter. It has an indescribable magic. If it can completely follow reason, then it is not love. Hui Mo sneered and said with fear, they are desperate, but they can still be happy. That is really terrible. I have to stay away from it for the rest of my life. Ning Shu couldn't help laughing. Have you ever eaten a green fruit? It was a fruit from the south. When it was ripe, it was green with a tinge of yellow. The first bite was extremely sour, making people want to spit it out. But after the first bite, you would experience a kind of wonderful and long sweetness, leaving you with a rich aftertaste. As long as one tasted it, there was no one who didn't love and hate it. In the end, they couldn't stop themselves. Because you know that no matter how bitter it is, it's just a prelude to sweetness. What if the green fruit you choose is bad and doesn't taste sweet at all? Ning Shu's voice was like the snow that melted in the palm and the bud that was spat out by the branches. That depends on whether your heart is sweet or not. If your heart is not sweet, then throw it away as soon as possible. If your heart is sweet, then even if it's arsenic, it's still caramel sugar. Hui Mo blinked his eyes. Really? Even I want to try it. Standing behind Ning Shu, Xiahou Qing pursed his lips as if he was tasting the bitter aftertaste of the green fruit. Li Yi couldn't stay here for a long time. After letting them talk for a while, Tan Siwei ordered people to take Li Yi away. Ning Shu stepped forward and looked at Ju Yang, who was in a daze. She said, the suspicion of Li Yi has been cleared. You should tell everything now. Otherwise, even the gods can't save you. What kind of sadness will Li Yi fall into? Think about it carefully. Ju Yang covered her face in pain. After a while, she said with a hoarse voice, I did plan to kill him that night, so I used the roast mutton to go upstairs. I took the opportunity to open the door and went out. These are all true. But when I arrived at Xuanfang Terrace and found him, he was already dead. His death was extremely tragic. The blood flowing out of his body was still warm. I was scared, so I didn't notice that I stepped on half a bloody footprint. After realizing it, I quickly took off my boots and ran out from the secret passage barefoot. Because I was too scared, I accidentally fell into the water and went home with wet clothes. I thought it was Li Yi who did it, so I confessed. I really didn't kill him. Please, you must save me. I will marry Li Yi next month. I must marry her in this life. Please, please. Ju Yang lost control of her emotions. Her eyes were red, and her forehead hit the ground. Chapter 335. We wanted to help you, but you did arrive at the scene of the crime at a sensitive time. This is really... Tan Siwei shook his head slightly and sighed in a low voice. He really didn't want to say the word difficult to provoke him. Tan Siwei thought for a moment and said, unless you can think of a way to prove your innocence. Ju Xiong's tall body tensed up, and an unbearable amount of grief spread across his face. There is another way, and that is to find the murderer as soon as possible. Ning Shu's calm voice pulled Ju Yang out of the abyss of despair. From now on, you have to promise that there is no lie in every word you say. If you can't do it, then don't blame us for not helping you. Ju Yang nodded repeatedly. Okay. I swear. I won't hide anything from you. If I can't do it, then let me die here. Ning Shu began to ask questions. When did you enter Xuanfeng Terrace, and when did you leave? From the time you entered to the time you left, what did you do? Who did you see? Tell me everything. Our shop has always had a rule of closing at midnight, and that day was no exception. After that, I spent about 15 minutes preparing. When no one was around, I rowed a small boat from the Chaobai River to the entrance of the secret passage, and went upstairs using the wooden ladder. I was afraid that someone would pass by and see me, so I leaned against the door and listened for a long time. When I didn't hear anything, I dared to open the secret passage door and go out. At that time, I estimated that it should be 1:15. At that time, almost everyone on the third floor was asleep. Only the room on the east side had some movements. It was very intense. But from the sounds, it didn't seem to be that bastards. So I went to the other rooms and blew sleeping incense into them. I quietly went in to take a look and found Miss Susu sleeping alone. Her maid was sleeping on the couch next to her. I was very puzzled and looked around everywhere, but I couldn't find him. I could only go to the terrace. I didn't expect him to be there, but he was lying on his back, dead. I was scared out of my wits and quickly ran away. Because I fell into the river and was tossed around for a long time, it was almost 3 o'clock when I came ashore. Ning Shu memorized the time points in her heart. From the beginning to the end, you didn't find a single suspicious person or thing? Ju Xiong wiped his face in disgust. No. Although I went with the intention of perishing together with them, I have never killed anyone before. So, from the beginning to the end, I was on tenterhooks and didn't dare to light a lamp when it was dark. I only dared to blow a match. I didn't notice anything unusual. Then why did you stand on the back of the wooden ladder before going upstairs through the secret passage? Now it was Ju Yang's turn to be stunned. What back of the wooden ladder? I didn't. If there was someone walking in the secret passage, there would be a light and there would be footsteps. When I didn't see anything, I went straight up. No. Ning Shu frowned suspiciously and took out something from the oiled paper bag. Is this blue cloth from your clothes? Ju Yarrow looked at it carefully. I was wearing an old blue shirt that day. I was afraid that it would be stained with blood. After I got home, I quickly changed it and threw it into the pigsty. As for whether or not it was accidentally torn, I really didn't notice. Pigsty. The corner of Hui Mo's mouth twitched. That was really a good place. Ning Shu suddenly remembered something and asked, by the way, my shopkeeper said that when you came back from the fragrant terrace for the first time, you fell down with mud all over your face. What happened? At that time, after I sneaked into the secret passage and unlocked the door, I ran up as fast as I could and pretended that nothing happened. I didn't dare to lean on the side of the road until I was far away from the gate. That day, there were 2 showers in a row during the day, so there was a big muddy pond on the ground. I was going to take a detour, but I didn't expect that a person suddenly jumped out from the side and bumped into me, so I fell into the muddy pond. The person was not tall and was very agile. When I looked back, he was already gone. If there was someone walking in the secret passage, there would be a light and there would be footsteps. When I didn't see anything, I went straight up. No. Ning Shu frowned suspiciously and took out something from the oiled paper bag. Is this blue cloth from your clothes? Ju Yarrow looked at it carefully. I was wearing an old blue shirt that day. I was afraid that it would be stained with blood. After I got home, I quickly changed it and threw it into the pigsty. As for whether or not it was accidentally torn, I really didn't notice. Pigsty. The corner of Hui Mo's mouth twitched. That was really a good place. Ning Shu suddenly remembered something and asked, by the way, my shopkeeper said that when you came back from the fragrant terrace for the first time, you fell down with mud all over your face. What happened? At that time, after I sneaked into the secret passage and unlocked the door, I ran up as fast as I could and pretended that nothing happened. I didn't dare to lean on the side of the road until I was far away from the gate. That day, there were 2 showers in a row during the day, so there was a big muddy pond on the ground. I was going to take a detour, but I didn't expect that a person suddenly jumped out from the side and bumped into me, so I fell into the muddy pond. The person was not tall and was very agile. When I looked back, he was already gone. After killing the envoy, he had led Ju Xiong to become his scapegoat step by step. As for him, he had been standing in the impenetrable darkness from beginning to end. Not even a single strand of his hair had been seen. Perhaps even the devil could not compare to this kind of scheming. Xiahou Qing said, "I don't believe that there is an unbreakable mechanism in this world. As long as there is a trace of wind, we can follow that trace of wind to find the hidden gap." Ning Shu looked at him in agreement. "I think so too." Xiahou Qing followed her voice and lowered his head. In the empty dungeon, his voice had the texture of jade knocking on celadon. "Which entrance are you going to choose next?" "Now, I'm mainly suspicious of 2 people." Before Ning Shu finished speaking, Xiahou Qing had already understood. "Li Yi and Susu?" Ning Shu nodded. "Yes, it's the 2 of them." Tan Siwei said, "Hasn't Li Yi already cleared her name? Why do you still suspect her?" Ning Shu calmly said, "The suspicious points about Susu are clearer. According to what Ju Xiong said, he was indeed going to kill someone that night. Moreover, if the envoys happened to stay overnight in Susu's room, he was going to kill both of them. But things are so mysterious. The envoy left early and died, but Susu was left alive. Was she really that lucky, or was there some other reason? In addition, she had a hidden illness before, but she still accepted the envoy as a guest. It's worth thinking about. As for Li Yi, it's impossible for her to kill someone, but it doesn't mean that she has completely eliminated her relationship with the case. On the contrary, there are 2 things that I think are very strange about her. First, the first thing she said when she saw me was, 'Benefactor, why did you save me? This case started with me. I have a sin that can't be washed away.' Where did this sin come from? Even if she wanted to take the blame, the envoy humiliated her first. He was her enemy. Even if she wanted to avenge herself, it was not against the law, but it was understandable. She shouldn't have such thoughts. Second, her actions. That night, Ju Xiong went to take revenge behind her back, but she, the real victim, went to the Da Xianggua temple and knelt in front of the Buddha statue for the whole night. That Buddha statue is a double-faced Buddha. One side is fate, the other side is regret. Which side is she kneeling on? Chapter 337. At the same time, Li Yi walked out of the prison under the lead of the officer. On the way, she passed by the cages where the procuress, the pimp, and others were locked up. Seeing her walking out safely, the procuress, who was trimming her nails, raised her head and sneered, "She was released, but we still have to suffer in here." The other girls next to her agreed angrily, "That's right." Susu sighed softly and said softly, "She also has a hard life." "Mom, don't ridicule her like this." Yin Shui and others mocked, "She does have a hard life, but don't we have a hard life in the cage? We can't stand it for one night. Aren't we suffering all the time in Shi City, the capital, and the world? We have a hard life, but at least we don't implicate anyone. We just eat the bitterness as honey, unlike some people who are so pretentious that they want to drag the whole world down with them." Yin Shui's voice was very loud. It was obvious that she said it deliberately for Li Yi to hear. Li Yi's steps were stiff, and her face was obviously worse. "Yin Shui." Susu walked over and pulled her. Only then did Yin Shui snort from her nostrils and shut her mouth. Li Yi's eyelashes trembled. She didn't dare to look at them. She quickened her pace and left here as if she was escaping. Susu raised her eyes and looked at Li Yi's back deeply. A quiet lake shattered by the rain flashed in her eyes, and then she slowly turned her back. Forsythia, who had already mingled with them, saw a delicate and lovely sachet on her waist. She curiously said, "Sister Susu, your sachet is so beautiful and it smells sweet. No wonder you smell good all the time. It smells so good." Where did you buy it? When I get out, I will ask my mother to buy one for me. Susu's eyes flashed. She pinched the sachet and put it into her clothes quietly. Oh, child's son took me out of the building on the night of the Lunar New Year's Eve. He bought it by chance when we passed by a small stall in East Market. I don't remember the specific location. But the sachet is almost the same. You can buy one casually. Well, I will go to East Market too. I just don't know if I can get out of here. Sister Susu, I'm so scared. Forsythia's eyes were filled with tears. Susu was a few years older than her. She hugged her like a little sister and patted her back. She murmured, "It will be fine. We will all be fine." Walking out of the prison, Ning Shu continued to unravel the mystery. Other than these two people, there's still something I can't figure out. Although the sound of the opening and closing of the secret passage is not loud, in the dead of night, the sound of a needle dropping on the ground would be particularly clear. The secret passage has been opened and closed several times. Did none of the guests on the third floor notice it? Tan Siwei thought for a moment and said, according to what Ju Xiong said just now, the commotion in the easternmost room was bigger, so they covered up the other sounds. Ning Shu asked, who is staying in the easternmost room of the Seeking Fragrant Terrace? Miss Su and the fourth young master of the Jiang family. According to their confession, the two of them spent the whole night. Tan Siwei flipped through the testimony book. His eyes were wide open and his face was hot. He thought for a long time before he chose a subtle word. Ahem, they didn't sleep much. In order to cover up his embarrassment, he quickly took a sip of tea. What did they do the whole night? Ning Shu's mouth twitched. They are really energetic. Were they not afraid of the wind? She seemed to have heard of the fourth young master of the Jiang family somewhere. Oh right, he was the playboy who dragged Cloud Leaf to the moon-embracing lake to see Niinu during the Phoenix Terrace case. He was really everywhere in the brothel. Hui Mo was in a daze for a while. When he woke up, he only heard the last two sentences. He curiously asked, "It's just one night. Is it a great ability? My young master can do it for 3 days and 3 nights. Tan Siwei almost spat out the tea in his mouth. Fat. Ning Shu. The bailiffs serving by the side all looked at Xiahou Qing in shock and admiration. This legendary fairy-like young master of the Xiahou family actually had such an ability. He really made all the men in the world admire him. Xiahou Qing's face instantly darkened. Chapter 338. Being scratched by a naughty cat, Ning Shu said sourly, 3 days and 3 nights. Your Highness is really smart and capable. I really admire you. She didn't know which girl he was talking to. She snorted in her heart and couldn't help but add, but I still advise your Highness to be careful. Hui Mo said proudly, yes, don't you know who our Shizzy is? Ah. Before he finished talking, he was hit by a golden bead and his acupoint was sealed. Hui Mo hurriedly begged Juicy to unseal his acupoint. He felt wronged and said, I didn't talk nonsense. 3 years ago, 50,000 soldiers of the vassal state disguised as refugees and forced their way into the border of Yunyang. They almost broke through the line of defense. Prince was trapped in the city because of his old injury. Wasn't it you who was ordered to rescue him? You led 8,000 soldiers of Yunyang to fight for 3 days and 3 nights without sleeping. Finally, you won the battle with fewer soldiers. You not only kept the border, but also killed Prince Xian of the vassal state. Your heroism is unparalleled. So this was what he meant by 3 days and 3 nights. Everyone was silent and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hui Mo was still confused. Xiahou Qing's face turned from black to white. He sneered and ordered, if you still want your tongue, don't talk too much in the future if you don't know how to speak. The old blue cloth that Ju Xiong wore that day is still in his house. Go and get the evidence. Hui Mo lowered his head sullenly and said, yes, I will go now. Since Crown Prince Xiahou was angry, the other bailiffs sensibly stood outside and tried their best not to provoke Crown Prince Xiahou. Xiahou Qing raised his eyebrows in the direction of Ning Shu, smart and capable. He stretched out his hand and Juicy knowingly poured a new cup of tea. Ning Shu quickly snatched it and sent it to Xiahou Qing. Your Highness is young and talented. Your reputation has already spread far and wide in Zhozhou. Isn't this smart and capable? Xiahou Qing didn't take it and said, admirable. Ning Shu smiled apologetically. Your Highness, you fought against 50,000 with 8,000 men, and in the end, you were still able to win despite being outnumbered. This little girl is truly in awe. Xiahou Qing, careful not to hurt yourself. Ning Shu was dripping with cold sweat. For the sake of the people and the country, you fought for 3 days and 3 nights without sleeping. Everyone who heard of you was filled with respect and treated you as a role model. However, this is indeed harmful to your health. I'm really worried about your Highness' health. Xiahou Qing's lips twitched. If that's the case, I should thank you instead. Ning Shu said modestly, you're welcome. It's what I should do. Xiahou Qing raised his hand and flicked her forehead. What a glib tongue. But at least he had accepted the tea that she had offered. Ning Shu rubbed her forehead, which didn't hurt much. She chuckled as she straightened her back and stood beside him. Tan Siwei stared at them in a daze. It seemed that other than the few days in prison, Ning Shu had never shown such a bright and lively smile in front of him. What was going on? Why did some things seem to be completely different from what he had imagined? He felt a slight pain in his heart. He withdrew his gaze and continued to flip through the testimony book in his hand without saying anything. Hui Mo didn't want to speak at all, and he couldn't say a word. He stood in front of the Zhu family's pigsty with a wooden face, feeling the cheerful humming of those lively and cute fat pigs, and the fragrance that was everywhere in the pigsty. In addition, there were piles of freshly baked pig dung. He retched and held back his tears. Step by step, he walked into the innermost part of the pig pen, as if he was going to die. Why was he always the one who got hurt? Chapter 339. Hui Mo quickly found the clothes and threw it in front of Ning Shu. With a wooden face, he ran straight to the well. He picked up a bucket of water and washed it on his right hand. After washing one bucket of water after another, until his hand could no longer feel anything. Then, he picked up a row of small knives that he used to dissect corpses and took turns to cut his wrist. After that, he went to pull out his sword. It was as if he was thinking about which way to cut off his hand would be faster and less painful. Shi Yang strolled over and looked at him like he was crazy. What's wrong with you? Hui Mo said, my hand, it's dirty. If it's dirty, just wash it. Hui Mo's 2 watery eyes were full of tears, and he said with grief and indignation, there are some things that can't be done. Once you do it, you can't wash it clean anymore. When he walked into the pigsty and was about to reach out to pick up the old clothes, a fat and cute pig excitedly ran over and gave birth to a pile of poop, which happened to land on the back of his hand. Even though his hand was almost bald from washing, that steaming hot feeling still lingered in his mind like a nightmare, and he was afraid that he would not be able to get rid of it in this lifetime. Shi Yang patted his shoulder sympathetically and comforted him. Hey, my hand is also dirty. No, it should be my back, my face, and my mouth are all dirty. His friend's miserable experience was always the best way to comfort his wounded heart. Hui Mo said, what's wrong with you? Shi Yang said with grief and indignation, yesterday, Lady Ning's secret guard, the one called Zi Gui, was poisoned and injured, right? His Highness actually ordered me to serve her. Do you know? Women. That's a terrible woman. Not only did I have to carry her on my back, but I also had to watch over her at night and serve her medicine. She was in a coma, and the medicine didn't taste good. I also had to find a straw and feed it to her bit by bit. Hui Mo, Shi Yang said, the most hateful thing was that some of the medicine flowed down her neck because she couldn't swallow it, so I had to help her wipe it. Then I pulled open her collar, and when she opened her eyes, she slapped me. I'm so angry. How can there be such an unreasonable woman? She's beautiful and powerful. I don't want to see her. Don't you think so? Hui Mo looked at him coldly. After a while, he raised his sword and waved it. I'll kill you. Ning Shu was speechless as she watched the commotion in the rear courtyard. She turned back to look at Xiahou Qing, who was usually calm and steady, calmly sipping tea. Once again, She had great doubts about the way His Highness picked up and raised children. Ning Shu deliberated for a long time before whispering, "Your Highness, aren't you afraid that they'll go overboard?" Xiahou Qing was very casual. "It's always like this in the palace. Don't worry, no one will die." So the only requirement was not to kill anyone? The corner of Ning Shu's mouth twitched. "Your Highness really has a unique way of raising children. It's true that I'm not very good at raising children. Most of the time, I let them grow up with their nature, as long as they remain pure and kind. Now that you mention it, I was indeed a little too lenient." Xiahou Qing's fingertips on his forehead gently tapped. "But it doesn't matter. It's enough if there's one person in a family who can teach children. Don't you think so?" His thin lips slightly opened. His tone was as plain as usual, but it invisibly made Ning Shu's legs go soft. Her whole heart was about to ripple. She hurriedly coughed to cover up her embarrassment. "Oh, it should be so." Xiahou Qing's mouth raised a faint arc. "That's good." He picked up the teacup and took a sip. She didn't know if the tea was too moist or something else, but a drop of tea stained his lips and flashed a faint light. Ning Shu's eyes were also glued to it. Her 6 senses were not clean. Chapter 340. She hurriedly forced herself to withdraw her gaze and turned back to sit in front of the table. She murmured, "Beauty destroys the country, beauty destroys the country." Then she could put Deji aside for the time being. She calmed down and carefully alienated the clues she had obtained so far, as well as the points to be investigated. She had just made a comparison and found that a piece of the back of the clothes was indeed scratched, which was exactly the same as the strip of cloth found before. Looking at the relationship between the characters and the events drawn on the paper, Ning Shu's eyes were deep in thought. She put down the pen and walked to the backyard, clapping her hands and calling the naughty children to come over. "Stop fooling around. There are a few things that we have to hurry up with now. First, we have to find out what happened on the night of the 7th of May. We have to ask about every detail. Li Yi should still be hiding something important from us. Second, we need to check Susu's family background. If I'm not wrong, she has a lot to do with this case. Third, we need to try to find the person who knocked Ju Yang into the mud pit. Ask if anyone passing by saw it. I suspect that this strip of cloth was deliberately cut off by that person and then hung behind the wooden ladder to frame him." Hui Mo said. Ju Yang said that the person who knocked him down was not very tall. The person's height probably reached his ear. Hey, isn't that similar to Xiaoqing's appearance? Then I'll draw a rough appearance according to Xiaoqing's back. It's convenient to find him. What nonsense are you talking about? He was talking nonsense. Ning Shu immediately hit him on the head and apologized to Tan Siwei on his behalf. "Xiaoqing, please don't lower yourself to his level. Children's words carry no harm." Hui Mo muttered, "Oh, I just said it casually. Do you have to be so cruel? And Xiaoqing has a good temper. No matter how I tease him, he won't be angry. How can he bear a grudge against me? Don't you think so, Xiaoqing?" Tan Siwei was stunned for a moment. He looked at Hui Mo with eyes full of surprise. It seemed that he was wondering why Hui Mo didn't get angry no matter how he teased him. However, his good upbringing still made him reply, "Oh, yes, it's just a casual joke. It doesn't matter." Only then did Hui Mo realize that he seemed to have inadvertently revealed a flaw. He quickly shut his mouth and pretended to be stupid while admiring the beautiful shape of the beam. Ning Shu pulled the topic back to cover for him. "In addition, we need to arrange a few people to keep an eye on Li Yi." Tan Siwei said, "Leave this matter to me. I will arrange for spies from the Supreme Court to keep an eye on her family." Ning Shu said, "That's good. Susu is still in the Supreme Court. I'll leave her to you." Shi Yang was responsible for taking people to investigate the details of the 7th day of the 5th lunar month. Tian Wen was responsible for investigating Susu's background. Hui Mo was responsible for investigating the nameless man who knocked down Ju Xiong that day. Everyone received their respective tasks and dispersed. Ning Shu and Xiahou Qing stood in front of the famous double-faced Buddha in the Great Xianghua Temple. As usual, the Buddhist temple was full of pilgrims. Especially in front of the double-faced Buddha, there were countless believers. Pious sandalwood and everlasting lamps were burning everywhere. On one hand, it was fate. Countless good men and women prayed for a good marriage in this life under the Buddha. On the other hand, it was regret. Believers who had committed karma knelt in front of the Buddha with a heart full of remorse. They only prayed that the Buddha could be merciful and forgive their sins. The ground was full of tears. When such two completely different groups of people were put together, it was particularly unreal. The young Buddhist monk squeezed out of the crowd who had nowhere to go. He was sweating and saluted to the two. Ningxu returned the salute and said sorry for troubling the young master. She began to listen to him talk about what happened that night. That benefactress was very strange. He said, "That night, I was patrolling the temple. I did see the benefactress kneeling in the direction of the double-faced Buddha outside the wall of the temple for a night. I have seen a lot of pious pilgrims, but not many of them were like her. She didn't speak or light a lamp. She just knelt there with her hands clasped together and silently wept. I asked her to leave but she didn't respond. I could only let her go. Every day in our temple, I got up at 2 in the morning to do morning prayers. When I opened the temple door, I didn't expect her to still be there. I went to ask her what happened. She said 3 words, "I regret." Thereupon Xiao Seng asked, "Why do you regret?" Her face was very ugly. I then excused myself and left. In the end, I heard her say something in a low voice from afar. She kowtowed 3 times to the double-faced Buddha and silently staggered away. Xiahou Qing asked, "What did she say?" I was a little far away. I didn't hear it clearly. It seemed to be because of betrayal. Chapter 341. Betrayal. These 2 words kept spinning in Ningxu's mind, causing her to be puzzled no matter how hard she thought. Betrayal was the opposite. Betrayal was the same. Going back on one's promise and going against one's heart was betrayal. Even if Li Yi felt that she had lost her innocence and implicated Ju Xiong's reputation, she was forced by someone and not of her own free will. Thus, there was no betrayal. But if the person she betrayed was not Ju Xiong, then who could it be? As for the word regret that came out of nowhere, what exactly was she regretting? As she pondered, the carriage slowly stopped in front of the Jiang family's gate. After pondering for a long time without any results, Ningxu jumped out of the carriage first and walked over to the Jiang family's gate, banging on it. The servant asked, "Who is it?" "Ningxu of Duke Guofu." The door opened a small crack. "What is the matter?" "I have been ordered to investigate the case of the envoy's sudden death. I would like to ask, my family's Daran is on official business and is not at home. Please go back." The servant finished speaking without any trace of politeness. Bang! The door was closed tightly. The force was so great that Ningxu's nose was covered in dust. Ningxu snorted twice and continued, "I am not here to see your family's Daran. Where is your family's 4th young master? He was invited to the banquet that night and was one of the few people who did not leave from beginning to end. I have a few questions to ask him." The servant was even more impolite. "My family's young master is unwell and is inconvenient to receive guests. Everything that should be said has already been said to the people of the Supreme Court. Please do not disturb him again." "Ningxu," the servant said, "why are you still not leaving? Our Jiang Fu does not welcome those who come uninvited." It was said that the Prime Minister's residence was a 7th-ranked official. This minister's residence was not to be outdone. Ningxu glanced at Xiahou Qing beside her and said, "Nanping Wang's heir apparent is right beside me. Are you sure you do not welcome him?" The people in the door were obviously in a panic. There was a flurry of footsteps inside. Not long after, the golden door finally opened. Minister Jiang personally came to welcome Xiahou Qing. He wished he could bring Xiahou Qing in like Buddha. Seeing Ningxu's mocking look, Minister Jiang immediately scolded the gatekeeper, "What's the matter?" Lady Ning was ordered by the emperor to investigate the case, but she dared to block the door without telling me. How preposterous. Lady Ning, please don't take offense. Hurry up and apologize to Lady Ning. Ning Shu waved her hand and teased, "Minister, you worry too much. There is no need to be angry over such a trivial matter. After all, even a dog on the road knows how to rely on people's power." "Minister, don't you think so?" Minister Jiang blushed and his face twitched. He showed a guilty look. It's not that I take advantage of my seniority, but that my son is too disappointing. He doesn't do anything serious all day long. He only knows how to flirt all day. Since he came back from Xuanfang Terrace yesterday, he hasn't been well. Yesterday, he barely dealt with the Supreme Judiciary's inquiry and then fainted. We've invited several doctors, but now he can't even get up. I'm really ashamed. Xiahou Qing raised his eyebrows and said, "What's the emergency of your son?" Minister Jiang glanced at Ning Shu, who was also curious. His face was even more embarrassed. He was simply ashamed to see people. "Prince Xiahou, the doctor said that his young Qi was exhausted too much and he was frightened. It's the disease of yang deficiency." Puff. Ning Shu tried hard to hold herself back for a long time to not lose her composure. No wonder the Jiang family's door was closed and they didn't cooperate. It was too shameful. He had such a disease at such a young age. If word got out, how could he raise his head in the capital? Even someone as calm as Xiahou Qing couldn't help but show a strange expression. "Don't worry, Lord Jiang. We're just going to ask a few simple questions. We won't provoke the fourth young master." Minister Jiang couldn't refuse, so he could only say, "Okay. This way, please." He personally led the way in front. Ning Shu could finally see the fourth young master, who was out of control. His face was indeed pale, and his whole body was dripping with cold sweat. He was lying on the bed, and even breathing was too exhausting. Several doctors were brewing medicine beside him. Ginseng and monkshood were thrown into the medicine stove as if they were free. Minister Jiang was angry and distressed. Fortunately, he turned his back and didn't look. "Let me take his pulse." Xiahou Qing walked forward and said. The doctors didn't know who he was, but they felt that this person was extraordinary. They hurriedly lifted the fourth young master's weak arm and handed it to him. Ning Shu knew that he was a genius, but she didn't expect him to be so good at diagnosing and taking pulses. Therefore, she curiously craned her neck to take a look. After taking the fourth young master's pulse, she probed the fourth young master's forehead and neck. Then, she said, someone gave him an aphrodisiac, and a large dose. Minister Jiang immediately turned around. "Who wants to harm my son?" You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.